You wouldn't believe it if someone told you. Elon Musk, a billionaire, taking the subway. It was a crisp autumn evening in Los Angeles, and the city hummed with its usual energy. Beneath the towering skyline, Elon Musk stood at the entrance of the subway station. The sight was surreal. One of the richest men in the world standing among commuters with nothing more than a hoodie and a backpack slung over his shoulder. He wasn't there to make headlines. In fact, Elon hoped to go unnoticed. The decision to ride the subway wasn't planned. It was one of those rare, impulsive moments in his otherwise meticulously scheduled life. After a long day of meetings at SpaceX, he'd felt an unusual urge to reconnect with the world beyond boardrooms and breakthroughs. As he descended the stairs, the air changed. The distant hum of trains grew louder, mingling with the chatter of passengers and the rhythmic clinking of turnstiles. It had been years since he last used public transport, and everything about it felt strangely foreign yet oddly familiar. For Elon, it wasn't just about curiosity. Lately, he'd been reflecting on how disconnected he often felt from ordinary life. The constant swirl of innovations and lofty dreams sometimes made it easy to forget the simple, human experience. Tonight, he sought that connection, a reminder of the world he rarely had time to pause and see. Swiping his Metro card at the turnstile, Elon moved with the flow of passengers toward the platform. He blended in easily. His casual attire and focused expression made him just another face in the crowd. The train roared into the station, its doors sliding open to reveal a packed interior. He hesitated for a moment before stepping on. The car was a patchwork of humanity. A group of teens laughing in the corner, a man nodding off in his seat, a woman scrolling through her phone. Elon found a spot near the middle and gripped the pole, swaying slightly as the train lurched forward. For a moment, he allowed himself to simply exist in the space. There were no urgent emails to answer, no prototypes to approve, just the steady rhythm of the train and the murmurs of the passengers around him. He couldn't have known then that this ordinary decision to ride the subway would lead to an extraordinary encounter, one that would remind him of what truly matters in life. Where are you watching from? Please publicly comment your opinion to let us know. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Have you ever looked at someone and just known something was wrong? The subway car swayed as it moved through the dark tunnels beneath Los Angeles, its lights flickering faintly. Elon leaned against the pole, his thoughts wandering. He had a habit of letting his mind drift, solving puzzles, imagining futures, or pondering problems yet to come. But tonight, something pulled his focus to the present. At first, it was just a fleeting glance, a quick scan of the passengers. His eyes passed over commuters engrossed in their phones, a man with a guitar case, and a group of friends chatting quietly. Then, near the far end of the car, something caught his attention. Sitting alone was a young girl, no older than 8. She was small, almost swallowed by the oversized purple coat she wore, clutching a worn-out teddy bear with fur so frayed it was almost gray. Her long braids were neatly done, but her face was tight with worry, her wide eyes darting to every corner of the car as if searching for someone, or maybe hiding from them. Elon's brow furrowed. At first, he tried to rationalize what he saw. Maybe her parents were nearby, just out of sight, or perhaps she was with someone who had temporarily stepped away. Yet, as the minutes ticked by, no one came over to her. No one even seemed to notice her. The girl hugged the teddy bear tighter, her small hands gripping it like a lifeline. She glanced nervously at the passengers, her lips pressed together as if she were trying not to cry. It was a heartbreaking sight, but no one else seemed to care. Heads stayed buried in screens or conversations, oblivious to the quiet tension emanating from the child. Elon couldn't ignore it. Something felt off. His mind raced with questions. Why is she alone? Where are her parents? How did she even get on the subway? He scanned the car again, more carefully this time. There were no adults paying her any attention, no signs that anyone was responsible for her. A strange unease crept into his chest. Elon was a father himself, and the thought of one of his children being in a similar situation made his stomach tighten. He took a deep breath, debating what to do. He didn't want to overstep, but he also couldn't just sit there and do nothing. The train lurched to a stop, and a few passengers exited, their absence making the little girl's loneliness all the more glaring. Elon leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on the child. She stared out the window, her face illuminated by the passing lights of the underground tunnel. For a moment, he thought he saw her lip tremble. That was it. He couldn't wait any longer. With a steadying breath, Elon stepped forward, weaving through the standing passengers until he was closer to her. The train jolted, and he grabbed a pole for balance. She didn't notice him approach at first, too lost in her own world of worry. "Hi there," he said softly, crouching slightly to meet her eye level. His voice was calm, warm, non-threatening. "Are you okay?" The girl flinched slightly, clutching her teddy bear even tighter. She didn't answer, her big, tear-filled eyes darting toward him before looking away again. Elon gave her a small, reassuring smile. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you," he said gently. I noticed you're by yourself. Are you waiting for someone?" She hesitated, her lips trembling as she seemed to weigh whether to answer. Finally, in a voice so quiet he could barely hear, she whispered, "I don't know where my mom is." Those words hit Elon harder than he expected. A wave of concern washed over him as he crouched further, trying to make himself less imposing. "Okay," he said softly. "It's all right. We'll figure this out together." The train slowed again, preparing to stop at the next station. Elon could feel the urgency building in his chest. He glanced toward the front of the car, hoping for a subway attendant or security guard, but there was no one in sight. For now, the only thing he knew for sure was that he couldn't leave this girl alone. Whatever her story was, she needed someone to care, and Elon was ready to be that someone. Sometimes, all it takes is a single gesture to change everything. The subway screeched to a halt, its doors sliding open to let in a blast of cool underground air. Passengers shuffled off, replaced by a new wave of tired commuters. Elon stayed crouched near the girl, his eyes level with hers, careful not to make any sudden movements. "What's your name?" he asked gently, his voice cutting through the low murmur of the subway car. For a moment, she didn't respond. Her wide eyes flicked to him, then to the floor, as if debating whether she could trust him. She hugged her teddy bear tighter, her fingers gripping the fabric until her knuckles turned white. "Eliza," she whispered at last, so quietly that Elon had to lean closer to hear her. "Eliza," he repeated with a soft smile, testing the name on his tongue. "That's a beautiful name." Eliza's lips quirked into the faintest hint of a smile before quickly disappearing. "Where's your mom, Eliza? Do you remember where she said she'd meet you?" he asked, keeping his tone calm and soothing. Eliza's small face crumpled, her chin quivering as she shook her head. "I don't know," she said, her voice cracking. "She told me to wait, but she didn't come." The weight of her words settled heavily in Elon's chest. This wasn't a case of a distracted parent on the same train. This little girl was truly alone. "It's okay," Elon said, reaching out a tentative hand. He stopped short, not wanting to scare her. "We'll figure it out together, all right? You're not alone anymore." The train jolted as it began to move again, and Eliza swayed slightly in her seat. She clutched her teddy bear for balance, her tiny fingers trembling. Without thinking, Elon placed a steadying hand on the edge of her seat. "Do you know your mom's phone number?" he asked, hoping for a quick solution. Eliza shook her head, her eyes filling with fresh tears. I don't remember it," she said, her voice barely audible. "That's okay," Elon assured her. "Do you know where you live? Or your school's name?" She hesitated, her small brows furrowing as she tried to remember. "We live by a park," she said slowly. "There's a big red slide." It wasn't much to go on, but it was a start. Elon's mind raced through options. He couldn't just leave her at the next stop. This wasn't something he could pass off to another passenger or ignore. As the train sped through the tunnels, a woman seated nearby glanced up from her phone, noticing the interaction. Her eyes softened as she took in the scene. A billionaire kneeling on the dirty floor of a subway car, speaking gently to a frightened child. She opened her mouth as if to say something but then hesitated, turning back to her screen. Elon turned back to Eliza, his voice steady. "Listen, Eliza. I know this is scary, but you're doing so well. I'm going to help you. Okay? I promise." For the first time, Eliza looked at him directly, her big, tear-filled eyes locking with his. She seemed to study his face, searching for something. Maybe kindness, maybe safety. Then, slowly, she reached out her hand, her tiny fingers wrapping around Elon's. The touch was light, almost hesitant, but it was enough. In that single moment, Elon felt a rush of emotion he hadn't expected. It wasn't the cold, calculating part of his brain that designed rockets and solved equations. It was something far more human, a protective instinct, a deep sense of responsibility. He tightened his grip just slightly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We'll figure this out," he said again, more confidently this time. The train slowed, preparing to stop at another station. Elon glanced at the map above the door, trying to orient himself. The city above them sprawled out in all directions, filled with possibilities and answers. Somewhere out there was Eliza's mother, undoubtedly worried and searching. For now, though, the only thing that mattered was the little girl who had just placed her trust in him. Have you ever felt invisible in the middle of a crowd? The train doors slid open with their familiar chime, revealing the bustling chaos of a busy station. A throng of commuters surged forward, squeezing into the car as others spilled out. Elon shielded Eliza instinctively, placing himself between her and the press of people. "Hold tight," he murmured, gripping the metal pole with one hand, while keeping Eliza's small hand securely in his other. She clung to him, her fingers tightening like a lifeline. Passengers jostled for space, some grumbling about the lack of seats, others burying themselves in their phones. No one seemed to notice the little girl clutching a teddy bear or the man standing protectively beside her. It struck Elon how easy it was for people to overlook what was right in front of them. The train lurched forward, and Eliza stumbled slightly. Elon steadied her, crouching down to meet her gaze. "You okay?" She nodded, though her wide eyes betrayed her unease. The noise, the movement, the sea of strangers. It was overwhelming. Elon scanned the car, searching for anyone who might help. A transit officer, a kind-looking passenger, someone with a clue about what to do next. His eyes landed on an elderly woman sitting nearby, her silver hair neatly pinned back. She was watching them curiously, her gaze soft and inviting. "Excuse me," Elon said, stepping closer while still holding Eliza's hand. "I'm trying to help this little girl find her mother. She's lost and can't remember her address. Would you happen to know if there's a station office nearby?" The woman's face lit up with understanding. "Oh, bless her heart," she said, her voice warm. She leaned forward, her kind eyes meeting Eliza's. "Hello, sweetie. What's your name?" "Eliza," the girl said softly, gripping her bear tighter. "That's a lovely name," the woman said, smiling. She turned back to Elon. "There's a station manager's office on the upper level. They might be able to call someone to help." "Thank you," Elon replied, relief flickering across his face. "I'll take her there." The woman nodded, giving Eliza a reassuring wave. "You'll be just fine, darling. This nice man will help you." As the train approached the next stop, Elon prepared to guide Eliza off. He glanced at her again, noting the nervous set of her jaw and the way she clutched her bear as if it were her only anchor. "Almost there," he said gently. "We'll get help soon." The train slowed, the doors opening with a hiss. Elon stepped onto the platform, pulling Eliza close as the crowd surged around them. The station was loud and bustling, the echo of footsteps and announcements bouncing off the tiled walls. "Stick with me," he said, weaving through the crowd. Eliza didn't let go of his hand, her grip firm despite her small size. It didn't take long to find the station office, a glass-paneled room tucked into a corner of the platform. Inside, a transit officer in a Navy uniform was busy typing on a computer. Elon knocked lightly on the doorframe, and the officer looked up, his expression shifting to one of concern when he saw Eliza. "Can I help you?" the officer asked, standing up from his desk. "This little girl is lost," Elon explained, his voice steady but urgent. "She can't find her mom, and she doesn't know her address or phone number." The officer's gaze softened as he knelt to Eliza's level. "Hi there, sweetheart. Don't worry, we'll help you find your mom. Can you tell me anything about where you live?" Eliza hesitated, her eyes darting to Elon for reassurance. "It's okay," he said, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "You can tell him." "There's a park with a red slide," she said quietly, and a tree with pink flowers." The officer nodded thoughtfully. "That's a good start. Do you remember your mom's name?" Eliza nodded. "Rebecca," she whispered. "All right, Rebecca. That helps," the officer said kindly. He turned back to Elon. "I'll make some calls and see if we can find her. You're welcome to stay here with her in the meantime." Elon nodded, guiding Eliza to a chair in the corner of the office. She climbed into the seat, her feet dangling as she hugged her bear close. As the officer got to work, Elon sat beside her, his mind churning. This wasn't how he'd expected his day to go, but he couldn't imagine walking away now. Eliza had trusted him, and he was determined to see this through. "Do you think we'll find her?" Eliza asked suddenly, her voice small. "We will," Elon said firmly. "I promise." Eliza studied his face for a moment, then nodded, seeming to take comfort in his confidence. And so they waited, surrounded by the hum of the station, two unlikely companions brought together by a twist of fate. "Do you believe that even the smallest detail can change everything?" Elon glanced at his watch as the station officer finished a call. The minutes stretched, each one intensifying the weight of Eliza's situation. Despite his calm demeanor, Elon couldn't shake the growing unease that gnawed at him. The officer hung up the phone and approached them, crouching to Eliza's eye level again. "I've contacted a few nearby precincts and shared the details you gave me, Eliza," he said gently. "We're waiting to see if anyone has reported a child missing." Eliza's lips trembled, her fingers fidgeting with the worn ear of her teddy bear. "What if she doesn't find me?" she asked softly. "She will," Elon said, his voice firm. "Your mom's looking for you, just like we're looking for her." The officer nodded in agreement. "She's probably just as worried as you are, sweetheart. We'll figure this out together." Elon leaned closer, his mind racing. He wasn't one to sit idle when there were problems to solve. "Is there a way to narrow things down?" he asked the officer. "A missing persons database, nearby schools, something?" The officer hesitated. "Normally, we'd rely on more specific information. The mention of a park with a red slide and a tree with pink flowers is helpful but vague. We need more details." Elon frowned, glancing at Eliza. Her wide eyes brimmed with worry, and it broke his heart. He thought back to her earlier description of her surroundings. "Eliza," he said gently, "is there anything else you can remember about where you live? Maybe a building near the park? A sign?" Eliza tilted her head, her brow furrowing in concentration. "There's a big clock," she said finally, and a store with lots of candy." "A clock and a candy store," Elon repeated, nodding. "That's something." The officer perked up. "That could help. I'll add those to the report." As the officer returned to his desk, Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had always been a problem solver, someone who thrived on challenges, but this was unlike anything he'd faced before. This wasn't about rockets or AI. This was about a little girl's safety and her fractured world. "Mr. Elon," Eliza said, her small voice pulling him from his thoughts. "Yes, Eliza? Thank you for staying with me." Her words were so earnest, so filled with trust, that they caught him off guard. Elon felt a lump rise in his throat as he gave her a small smile. "Of course. I'm not going anywhere." The station office buzzed with activity as other transit staff moved about. Elon noticed one of them, a younger man with a friendly face, eyeing Eliza curiously. He approached, crouching next to her chair. "Hey there," he said kindly. "You mentioned a candy store near your home. Was there a picture or a name on the sign?" Eliza thought for a moment, her eyes lighting up. "It's a lollipop, a big one, with stripes." The young man smiled. "I think I know the store she's talking about. It's near Maple Grove Park. They have a red slide there, too." The officer overheard and immediately looked up. "That's a solid lead. Let me call the precinct nearest to Maple Grove." Elon felt a surge of hope. "If that's her neighborhood, maybe someone there knows her mother," he said. As the officer made the call, Elon turned back to Eliza. "You're doing great," he said. "That was a really helpful clue." Eliza's lips curled into a faint smile, her grip on the teddy bear loosening just slightly. For the first time since he'd found her, Elon saw a glimmer of relief in her eyes. Minutes later, the officer approached them again, his expression brighter. "Good news," he said. "There's a report from a woman in that area who's been looking for her daughter. She described her as 8 years old, carrying a pink bear and wearing a blue coat." "That's her," Elon said, his voice tinged with excitement. Eliza's face lit up. "That's my mom." The officer crouched down again, his tone reassuring. "We've told her you're safe, and she's on her way to meet us here. It won't be long now." Tears welled in Eliza's eyes as she clutched her bear tightly. "She's really coming?" "She's really coming," the officer confirmed. Elon felt an immense wave of relief wash over him. For the first time since this unexpected journey began, the end was in sight. "See? I told you we'd find her," he said, smiling down at Eliza. Eliza nodded, her small smile growing wider. In that moment, Elon knew he'd done more than just help her find her mother. He'd given her hope. Have you ever seen a moment so pure it made the world stop? The minutes stretched endlessly as Eliza clung tightly to her teddy bear, her small legs swinging nervously under the chair. Elon sat beside her, his arm resting on the back of the seat in a protective, almost fatherly way. The station's fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, a constant hum against the silence that settled between them. "She'll be here soon," Elon reassured her, his voice calm and steady. "You've been very brave, Eliza." Eliza looked up at him, her wide eyes filled with anticipation and a flicker of doubt. "Do you think she's mad at me?" "Mad at you?" Elon repeated, surprised. "Why would she be mad?" Eliza shrugged, hugging her bear closer. "Because I got on the subway by myself. She told me to wait at the park, but I got scared when she didn't come." Elon crouched down to meet her eye level, his expression softening. "Eliza, your mom isn't going to be mad at you. She's probably been really worried, but she'll just be happy to see you safe." Eliza nodded slowly, though her fidgeting didn't stop. Elon reached over and gently patted her shoulder. "You know," he said, his tone playful, "if I had someone as smart and brave as you for a daughter, I'd be pretty proud." A small smile crept onto Eliza's face. "Really?" "Really," Elon said, grinning. The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted their moment. Elon turned to see a woman rushing toward them, her face pale with worry, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mommy!" Eliza cried, jumping out of her chair and running to her mother. The woman dropped to her knees, arms outstretched, and caught Eliza in a fierce embrace. "Eliza! Oh, my baby! I'm so sorry!" she sobbed, holding her daughter tightly. Eliza clung to her mother, her tears flowing freely now. "I was so scared, Mommy. I didn't know where you were." "I know, sweetheart. I'm so sorry," her mother said, her voice breaking. "I was late, and when I got to the park, you were gone. I looked everywhere for you." Elon watched the reunion, a lump forming in his throat. There was something profoundly humbling about witnessing such raw emotion. Fear, relief, and love all tangled together in a moment of connection. After a long moment, Eliza's mother pulled back just enough to look at her. She brushed a stray curl from her daughter's face and kissed her forehead. "Are you okay? Did anyone hurt you?" Eliza shook her head and turned to point at Elon. "He helped me, Mommy. Mr. Elon stayed with me the whole time." The woman looked up at Elon, her eyes filled with gratitude. She stood, still holding Eliza's hand, and stepped closer. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "I don't even know how to begin thanking you. If you hadn't stayed with her," she trailed off, her eyes welling with tears again. Elon shook his head. "There's no need to thank me. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time." "No," she insisted, her voice firm despite the tears. "You stayed. You didn't have to, but you did. That means everything." Eliza's mother introduced herself as Sarah, explaining in rushed, apologetic sentences how she'd been delayed by a medical emergency at work. She was a nurse working long shifts, and with no one to watch Eliza that evening, she told her to wait at the park until she could get there. I never should have told her to wait there, Sarah said, her voice thick with guilt. I thought I'd be back in time. I didn't think. It's okay, Elon interrupted gently. You're doing your best. It's clear how much you love her. Sarah's eyes softened, though her guilt remained etched in her features. She crouched to Eliza's level again, holding both of her small hands. I promise, this will never happen again. I'll make sure of it, okay? Eliza nodded, her trust in her mother unwavering. The station officer stepped forward, his demeanor professional but warm. It's good to see you two reunited, he said. Just to be sure everything's squared away, we'll need to take down some additional information. It's routine. Sarah nodded, her grip on Eliza's hand tightening. Of course. Anything you need? As the officer led Sarah aside to complete the paperwork, Eliza stayed close to Elon, her teddy bear tucked securely under her arm. She looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. Mr. Elon? Yes, Eliza. Are you always this nice to people? Elon chuckled softly, crouching down to meet her gaze. I try to be. The world's a better place when we help each other. Eliza smiled, her trust in him absolute, and in that moment, Elon felt a quiet sense of fulfillment, as though his presence in Eliza's life, however brief, had made a lasting impact. As Sarah returned, her paperwork complete, she offered Elon one final, heartfelt thank you. If there's ever anything I can do to repay you, there's no need, Elon said with a smile. Just take care of each other. As the two walked away, hand in hand, Elon stood there for a moment, watching them disappear into the crowd. For all his ventures and accomplishments, this moment felt like one of the most important things he'd ever been part of. And with that thought, he turned and walked back toward the subway platform, ready to return to his world but forever changed by this fleeting, unforgettable encounter. Have you ever felt like the smallest act of kindness could ripple through the rest of your life? Elon sat on the subway again, the hum of the train filling the air as the car glided through dimly lit tunnels. His hoodie was pulled up once more, shielding his face from the occasional glances of fellow passengers. But for once, he didn't care about blending in. His thoughts were far from the subdued chaos of the train, replaying the events of the evening in his mind. The way Eliza had clung to her mother's hand, the relief in Sarah's eyes when she saw her daughter safe, the simplicity of that moment, yet how profound it had felt. Elon rested his elbow on the window's edge, staring out into the dark blur of the tunnels. He could still hear Eliza's small voice, her trust in him palpable. Are you always this nice to people? She'd asked, her words lingering like an echo. He exhaled deeply, tapping his fingers against his knee. For someone whose life was dominated by the extraordinary, space exploration, artificial intelligence, electric cars, this ordinary moment had carried more weight than he'd anticipated. The train jolted slightly as it pulled into another station, the doors hissing open to let on a handful of new passengers. Elon glanced at them absently, his mind still elsewhere. He thought about Sarah's story, about her struggle to balance the impossible weight of working two jobs while trying to raise a child on her own. It was a story he'd heard variations of before, but had never witnessed so closely. For all his accomplishments, there were moments like this that reminded him how far removed his life had become from the average person's day-to-day struggles. It wasn't about pity, it was about perspective. The train started moving again, and Elon found himself wondering what else he could have done for Sarah and Eliza. Buying them a home would be easy, a drop in the ocean of his resources, but would it truly help? He wanted to do more, not just for them but for others like them. Elon pulled out his phone, scrolling through his notes app. He quickly jotted down a line: explore support initiatives for single-parent households, housing, childcare, education. The train screeched to a halt at another station, jolting him slightly in his seat. A group of teenagers boarded, their laughter and chatter filling the quiet car. Elon watched them for a moment, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. When was the last time he'd ridden the subway? Years, maybe decades ago. It had felt so unfamiliar at first, like stepping into another world. But now, after everything that had happened, it felt strangely grounding. The teenagers took seats a few rows away, still talking animatedly about their evening plans. One of them glanced Elon's way, squinting slightly as if trying to place his face. Elon shifted in his seat, pulling his hoodie down a bit further, and the teen lost interest. He leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. The night had been draining, emotionally more than physically. But there was also a quiet sense of fulfillment, a feeling he didn't often associate with his work. For all the rockets and algorithms, there was something uniquely human about tonight's experience. The train emerged from the tunnel, and Elon blinked against the sudden brightness of the city lights streaming through the window. The skyline of Los Angeles stretched out before him, a glowing testament to human ambition and resilience. As the train slowed to his stop, Elon stood, adjusting his hoodie and sliding his phone into his pocket. He stepped off the train and onto the platform, the cool night air brushing against his face. Walking toward the exit, he felt the weight of the evening settling into his chest, not in a heavy way, but like a seed planting itself, ready to grow into something meaningful. The city buzzed with life around him as he emerged from the station. He pulled his phone out again, opening his notes and adding one more thought. Kindness matters, more than we know. He slid the phone back into his pocket and walked toward his car, his mind already racing with ideas for how he could turn this fleeting moment of connection into lasting change. As he drove into the night, Elon couldn't help but smile. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he'd taken a step toward something truly impactful, not in the stars, but right here on Earth. You won't believe it, but sometimes a small act can spark the beginning of something much bigger. Elon sat at his desk in his office, the early morning light filtering through the windows. It had been a long night, his mind still preoccupied with the events of yesterday. Eliza's smile, Sarah's quiet gratitude, it all lingered in his thoughts. He tapped his pen against the desk, a new idea forming in his mind. For years, he had built companies that sought to change the world in monumental ways, colonizing Mars, creating electric vehicles, pioneering artificial intelligence. But now, his thoughts weren't on Mars or electric cars. They were on something much closer to home, something that could impact lives immediately. His office phone rang, breaking his concentration. Elon answered it without thinking, his eyes still focused on the whiteboard in front of him, filled with complex equations and plans for new ventures. Mr. Musk, it's Rachel from the Foundation, the voice on the other end said. He nodded, though no one could see him. Yes, Rachel, how's everything going? We've made significant progress with the housing project for low-income families, she replied. But there's something new on the radar. We've got a proposal for a new initiative aimed at supporting single-parent households. Elon's interest peaked. He leaned forward, his pen still tapping rhythmically against the desk. Tell me more. Rachel continued, it's still in its early stages, but we're looking at creating a network of resources, housing, childcare, job training programs, and a community of support for single parents. The goal is to make sure they have the tools and stability they need to get back on their feet. Elon's mind raced. This was exactly what he had been thinking about last night on the subway. It was the solution he had been searching for, a way to make a tangible difference in people's lives, especially for those like Sarah and Eliza. I want to be a part of this, Elon said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. We need to move fast on this. I want a plan on my desk by the end of the day. Rachel was silent for a moment before responding. You're serious about this, aren't you? Eliza's face is still in my mind. She deserves more than a moment of kindness. She deserves a future where she doesn't have to worry about being left alone again. Elon's voice softened with sincerity. Let's make this happen. The call ended, and Elon sat back in his chair, the weight of the decision settling in. This wasn't about charity. It was about creating a system that could support families in need, giving them the chance to thrive. He pulled out his phone again, opening a new note in the app. He quickly typed, launch a national initiative for single parents, housing, job support, education. Invest in stability, not just survival. A sense of purpose washed over him as he hit the send button to Rachel. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but he was used to navigating obstacles. He had faced bigger challenges before, ones that had seemed impossible. And yet, here he was, about to embark on something even more personal, something that could directly impact lives in ways that rockets and artificial intelligence never could. As he stood up to grab his coat, a text came through from Sarah. Elon, I wanted to thank you again. Maddie is so happy in the new home. I still can't believe you made that happen. I never expected someone like you to care so much. Elon's heart skipped a beat as he read the message. He had given them a safe place to live, but he knew that was just the beginning. It wasn't about giving someone a house. It was about giving them hope. He typed back quickly, "It's just the beginning, Sarah. I want to make sure Eliza and all children like her have the future they deserve. You're not alone in this anymore." Elon paused before sending the message. He could feel the weight of it, the responsibility that came with this promise. But for the first time in years, he felt more than just the pressure of his businesses. He felt a sense of responsibility to humanity, to people like Sarah and Eliza, whose lives he had briefly touched. The thought of helping them, of doing more, filled him with a warmth he couldn't shake. He knew that if he wanted to make the world better, it had to start here, with the people who needed it the most. He walked out of his office, determination set in his eyes. The plan he had started to form was no longer just a dream. It was real, and it was already in motion. The most surprising thing you've ever heard. It's unbelievable. Sometimes, the right moment can change everything. Elon's mind raced as he walked through the headquarters, his steps purposeful. This new initiative had taken root faster than he had expected, and he couldn't shake the feeling that this was his true calling. The pressure of billion-dollar companies and cutting-edge technologies had always been intense, but this was different. This felt more significant. He had always known he could change the world, but this was about something he hadn't fully understood until now, impacting individual lives, one by one. It wasn't about reaching the stars anymore. It was about making sure that the people who were struggling on Earth had a chance to thrive. He reached his office and sat down at his desk, tapping his fingers on the surface as he processed everything. The Foundation's proposal was coming together quickly, but there were still so many details to work out. Housing, job placement, mental health services. It was a massive undertaking, and yet it seemed so clear. The most important thing was stability. Giving people a foundation they could build on, a place to find strength again. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his thoughts. It was Rachel, the head of his foundation, with an update on the initiative. "Elon, we've made some great progress on the plan. We're in talks with several housing developers, and the local government is on board for providing subsidies for single-parent families. But we need to move quickly. We have a lot of people waiting for this kind of help." Elon leaned back in his chair, the weight of Rachel's words settling over him. There were people out there, families like Sarah's, who were just waiting for something, anything, that could give them hope. And now, it was his turn to give them that chance. He typed back quickly, "Let's move faster. I'll take care of the funding. Let's get the ball rolling on this." He stood up and walked to the window, looking out over the city. The skyline of Los Angeles stretched out before him, a blend of shining glass and fading sunlight. But below, in the neighborhoods where the need was greatest, the people were just trying to make it through another day. And those were the people who needed him most. He thought about Eliza again. Sarah, Maddie, they were just one small part of the larger picture, but they were the ones who had sparked this change. He had been driven by the urgency to help them, but now he saw the bigger mission ahead. It wasn't about just one family anymore. It was about building something bigger, a network of resources that would help thousands, even millions of single parents across the country. They deserved a better life, and Elon knew he was in the position to help make that happen. He made another call, this time to a friend of his who worked in government. A few minutes later, he was on the phone with the mayor of Los Angeles. "Elon, good to hear from you," the mayor said, his voice warm but businesslike. "What's going on?" "I've got an idea that could change a lot of lives. It's an initiative to support single parents, get them back on their feet with housing, job programs, and support systems," Elon explained. There was a pause on the line. "I'm listening," the mayor said cautiously. "I want you to help us make it happen here. We'll work with local agencies, housing developers, and nonprofits to build this from the ground up. It's going to take a lot of coordination, but we have to move quickly." "Sounds ambitious. But if anyone can pull this off, it's you, Elon," the mayor said, the enthusiasm growing in his voice. "I'll get our team on it. Let's get the ball rolling." Elon hung up the phone, his heart pounding. That was the first step, a significant one. It was happening. He had already promised Sarah he wouldn't let her and Maddie face another struggle like that again. But now, he was making that promise to thousands of others. And he was going to keep it. As the days passed, the plan started to fall into place. Rachel and the Foundation's team worked tirelessly to put together a comprehensive plan, while Elon began securing the funding. Housing contracts were signed, and partnerships with local nonprofits grew. But it wasn't just about the logistics. Elon spent more and more time meeting with single parents, hearing their stories, and understanding their struggles. Every encounter left a lasting impact. The weight of their words stayed with him, fueling his drive to make this initiative a success. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elon found himself at a small dinner with Sarah and Maddie. It had been a few weeks since their lives had changed, and he could see the difference already. Maddie was more animated, laughing as she told him about her new school friends, while Sarah looked more at peace, though her eyes still held the exhaustion of her past struggles. "Thank you," Sarah said quietly, her voice carrying a weight of gratitude. "I don't know how to explain what this has meant to us. You didn't have to do this, but you did." Elon smiled, the words she said filling him with warmth. He could see the hope returning to her eyes, and it was a reminder of why he was doing all of this. "Like I said, it's just the beginning," Elon replied. "You're not alone anymore." And as he sat there, surrounded by the people who had made his decision feel even more meaningful, Elon knew he was right. This was just the start of something much bigger. The kind of change that could ripple through generations, shaping the future in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But he was ready, because for the first time in years, he was building something that wasn't about technology or space. It was about humanity. It was about real people, real families, and the future they deserved. You won't believe anything, no one thought this could happen. But what Elon had done was just the beginning. It was the first ripple in a wave that would change everything. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, negotiations, and media coverage. Elon's initiative, designed to support single parents and families in need, had garnered national attention. News outlets picked up the story, spreading it across social media and beyond. The initial response was overwhelming. People from all walks of life reached out, offering their support, their resources, and their time. What had started as a simple idea, born from a chance encounter with a little girl on a bus, had become something much larger. Elon knew the Foundation's work was far from over, but it was clear that he had sparked something. For Sarah and Maddie, life was changing in ways they hadn't thought possible. They were still adjusting to their new home, a warm place where Maddie could run and play freely without the worry that had followed them for so long. Sarah had even started taking some time for herself, something she hadn't done in years. The sense of relief on her face was evident, and it made Elon feel as though the work was truly worthwhile. But there was more to be done, much more. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling day of meetings with the Foundation's partners, Elon found himself at his desk, surrounded by files and notes. His phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. "Elon, we've got a new development. I think this could be big." Curious, he picked up the phone and read the message. "We've been approached by several local businesses wanting to offer job placements for single parents in our program. They're not just looking to hire, they want to create real career paths, with mentorship and growth opportunities." Elon leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. This was exactly what he had envisioned. This wasn't just about housing or financial assistance. It was about giving people the tools to succeed long-term. He quickly typed back, "That's exactly what we need. Let's set up a meeting with them." The next few days were filled with conversations about building a comprehensive program that would not only provide jobs, but also provide the training and support parents needed to thrive in those roles. These weren't just entry-level positions. These were career opportunities that could change the trajectory of entire families' lives. As these plans started to take shape, Elon couldn't help but think of the countless other children like Maddie, children who had to grow up far too fast, who didn't have the luxury of a stable home or a safe place to play. It was for them that this program needed to succeed. It was for their future. But it wasn't just about the kids. It was about the parents, the ones who had been grinding day in and day out, sacrificing so much to make sure their families had enough. This was a way to show them that they didn't have to do it alone anymore, that their hard work could be recognized, rewarded, and supported. As the weeks turned into months, the initiative began to evolve. More businesses signed on, offering job placements, training programs, and even scholarships for further education. Local schools collaborated to offer after-school care programs, and mental health organizations came together to provide counseling services for parents who needed them. Elon had created a network of support that was not only powerful but also sustainable. And as the foundation's work expanded into other cities, he began to realize just how far-reaching this could be. One evening, while reviewing the latest reports on the program's impact, Elon received a call from Sarah. Her voice, always so steady, now held a note of excitement. "Elon, you won't believe it," she said. "Maddie, she's been selected for a scholarship to a private school. She's so excited. We never thought this would be possible, but now she's got a chance to really make something of herself." A smile spread across Elon's face. He had known that helping Sarah and Maddie would create a ripple effect, but hearing it in real time, hearing the joy in Sarah's voice, reminded him that this wasn't just about charity. This was about changing the course of a life, a future, and a community. "That's amazing, Sarah," Elon said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so happy for her. She deserves it. Thank you for everything, Elon. You've changed our lives. And I know you're doing the same for so many others." As Elon ended the call, he sat back in his chair, letting the weight of her words settle over him. This wasn't just a one-off story. It was happening all around him. The ripple effect was real. Families were changing, and communities were growing stronger. But even as Elon reveled in the success of the initiative, he knew this was only the beginning. There were still so many families in need, so many people who hadn't yet experienced the support they so desperately required, and he was determined to reach them. In the months that followed, the initiative continued to expand. More businesses, schools, and communities joined the movement, creating a web of support that stretched across the country. Elon was no longer just a businessman or a tech mogul. He was a leader in social change, an advocate for those who had often been forgotten. But it was the personal moments that meant the most. The calls with parents like Sarah, the smiles of children like Maddie, whose futures were brighter now than they had ever been before. It was those moments that reminded Elon why he was doing all of this, to give people not just a handout, but a real chance at a better life. And as he looked out over the city from his office window one evening, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. It had started with a single act of kindness, a moment of connection with a scared little girl on a bus. But it had grown into something far greater, something that would continue to ripple outward, touching lives for generations to come. Elon knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning, and the journey was far from over. Have you ever imagined that one moment could change the course of your entire life? That's what happened when Elon made a decision that would turn the world upside down for so many. Elon sat at his desk, staring at the growing list of partners and supporters that had rallied behind the Foundation's initiative. Each new name represented a step forward toward creating a network of support that could transform entire communities. It had been a whirlwind of activity, but the momentum felt unstoppable. Every day, something new was being set into motion, and every day, the impact was more profound. As the Foundation grew, so did Elon's commitment. What had begun as an act of compassion had blossomed into a movement that no one could have predicted. The media had kept the story alive, painting Elon as a philanthropist who was using his wealth and influence to make a difference. But to him, this was never about the headlines. It was about real change, real impact. And it was happening. Sarah and Maddie had become symbols of the Foundation's success. Maddie's scholarship to a private school had been the catalyst for a series of stories that followed, each one highlighting how a small act of kindness could ignite a larger, global conversation. People from all over the world had reached out, sharing their own experiences of overcoming hardships and offering their own resources to help others. It wasn't just about giving a child a safe place to live or offering a scholarship. It was about making sure that no one had to go through life feeling alone, isolated, or unsupported. It was about creating a sense of community where everyone, no matter their background or circumstances, could find a way forward. But even as the initiative flourished, Elon knew that there was still much more to do. One of the things that had struck him most throughout this journey was the sheer number of people who were struggling in silence. They were out there, working hard every day, raising their children, trying to make ends meet, yet they felt as though no one saw them. He thought about the thousands of other parents just like Sarah, parents who were juggling multiple jobs, facing financial uncertainty, and struggling with feelings of isolation. For them, the support that the foundation was providing could mean the difference between surviving and thriving. As he sifted through the latest round of proposals and reports, his phone buzzed once again. It was a message from Rachel. "We have another development. This could be a game changer. We've been approached by a national tech company interested in sponsoring the next phase of the program. They want to help us scale the initiative, making it accessible to families in more cities." Elon's pulse quickened. This was what he had been waiting for, an opportunity to take the program to a national level. He immediately scheduled a meeting with the tech company to discuss the possibilities. This was the kind of partnership that could help them reach even more families, providing the resources, technology, and infrastructure needed to make the foundation's work more efficient and impactful. In the days that followed, the meeting with the tech company proved to be just the breakthrough they needed. The company, known for its innovations in AI and community development, was eager to integrate its technology with the foundation's mission. They proposed a pilot program that would connect families in need with local resources, offering a personalized platform for everything from job searches to childcare options to mental health support. For Elon, this felt like the perfect next step. The idea of combining technology with human-centered support was something he had always believed in. He had seen firsthand the difference that access to the right resources could make, and this was the perfect opportunity to expand that access on a grand scale. The pilot program was set to launch in select cities, with a goal of scaling nationwide within the year. Elon knew that the challenge ahead would be immense, but he felt a renewed sense of purpose. It wasn't just about offering a temporary fix. It was about creating long-term change. This program could provide families with the tools they needed to take control of their futures, and it could break the cycle of poverty and isolation that so many had been trapped in. As the days passed, the foundation's work continued to evolve. New partnerships formed, more families were supported, and the ripple effect continued to grow. What had started with a simple act of kindness had sparked a movement that was changing lives. And even as Elon looked to the future, he never lost sight of the personal moments, the quiet conversations, the thank yous, the smiles that reminded him of why he was doing all of this in the first place. For Sarah, Maddie, and countless others, the journey was just beginning. And as Elon thought about the future, he realized that this wasn't just a story about him. It was a story about all of them, the ones who had been forgotten, the ones who had been overlooked, and the ones who had been given a chance to change their lives. In the end, it was never just about the wealth or the technology. It was about human connection. It was about seeing each other, helping each other, and lifting each other up. And that, Elon thought, was the greatest gift of all. Can you imagine a moment so powerful that it sets off a chain reaction, one that changes everything in its wake? That's what happened when the first pilot program went live. The morning of the pilot program launch felt like a turning point, a moment where everything that had been building for months would finally come together. The tech company's systems had been integrated seamlessly into the foundation's infrastructure, and the first families were about to begin using the platform. It was a huge step forward, and Elon felt a mix of excitement and anticipation. As the launch event began, Elon stood before a room full of reporters, sponsors, and supporters, each one eager to see what would come next. He was ready to share the vision, what this new initiative could mean for families across the country, and how it could help break down barriers that had long kept people from accessing the resources they needed to succeed. He could see the faces of Sarah and Maddie in the crowd, standing together, a symbol of everything that had come from this journey. Maddie's bright smile reminded him of why he'd started this whole endeavor in the first place. The need to make a difference, not just for one person, but for as many people as possible. The first families who signed up were nervous but hopeful. They filled out their profiles on the platform, answering questions about their specific needs, whether it was job assistance, housing support, or mental health resources. The platform was designed to connect them with personalized services that would help them not only survive but thrive. It was a lifeline, an avenue for individuals and families to regain control of their circumstances. The first results started coming in just hours after the launch. Families began receiving recommendations for nearby job openings that fit their skills, opportunities for local food banks, and resources for children's education. It wasn't perfect, there were kinks to work out, but the system worked. It was making an impact. Elon was in his office when the first feedback started pouring in. Rachel walked in with a handful of letters and emails. As she handed them to him, she could see the look on his face. These weren't just thank yous. They were heartfelt, emotional messages from families whose lives had already been transformed. They were stories of parents who had been out of work for months suddenly receiving job offers, single mothers finding emergency childcare, and families getting access to health care they couldn't afford before. One letter, in particular, stood out. It was from a father in a small town who had been struggling to make ends meet after his wife's passing. He had 2 young children to care for and had been working long hours in a low-paying job. Thanks to the platform, he had connected with a local community center that offered free after-school programs for his kids. He also found a higher-paying job at a nearby company, which would allow him to provide better for his family. The message ended with a simple but powerful sentence. "I don't know how to thank you, but you've changed everything for us." Elon's heart swelled as he read the letter. This was the ripple effect he had been hoping for. The realization that one act of kindness, one initiative, could begin to shift entire communities. It wasn't just about giving people a handout. It was about giving them the tools to rebuild their own lives. As the days went by, the feedback continued to pour in. People were starting to see the platform as more than just a resource. They saw it as a lifeline, a bridge to a better future. Word of mouth spread quickly, and soon the foundation was receiving requests from other cities and states to implement the program. Elon knew this was just the beginning. The program's impact was still in its infancy, and there were so many more families who needed help. But the momentum was undeniable. He had set the wheels in motion, and now there was no turning back. As the first few weeks passed, the tech company that had partnered with the foundation saw its platform being used in ways they hadn't anticipated. They had initially thought it would be a small-scale project, one that helped a few hundred families. But the response was overwhelming. More families signed up every day, and the demand for services grew faster than anyone had expected. The platform's capabilities were constantly being improved. The tech company's engineers worked tirelessly to enhance the AI, making it even smarter and more efficient. They began incorporating new features, like a 24/7 helpline, peer-to-peer support forums, and even mental health resources that could be accessed by families who needed someone to talk to. For Elon, it was clear that this was a turning point in his life. This wasn't just about wealth or fame. It was about creating a legacy that would outlast him. The foundation was his way of giving back, of using the privilege and resources he had to help others who were less fortunate. It was a new chapter in his life, one that was far more meaningful than anything he had achieved in business. But the work wasn't done. There was still so much more to be done. The platform needed to expand. More families needed to be helped. More partnerships needed to be forged. Elon knew this was just the beginning of a journey that would take years, perhaps even decades, to fully realize. As he stood in his office, looking out over the city, Elon couldn't help but feel a sense of fulfillment. He had helped one little girl, and in doing so, had created a movement that was changing the lives of countless others. And as he thought about the future, he knew that this was only the first ripple of many more to come. The road ahead would be challenging, but it would be worth it. Because sometimes, have you ever had a moment where you didn't expect to meet someone who would change everything? Well, that's exactly what happened when a surprise visitor knocked on the door. Elon had just returned home from a long day of meetings. The evening was quiet, almost too quiet, if such a thing existed. As he sat down at his desk, looking through more feedback and proposals for the foundation, the phone rang unexpectedly. He glanced at the caller ID, recognizing the number as Sarah's. "Elon, you won't believe this," Sarah said, her voice laced with excitement. "I just got off the phone with a woman named May. She's been following the program, and she wants to meet you. She says she has a story to share with you." "A woman named May?" Elon wondered what this could be about. He hadn't expected anyone else to be reaching out. He knew the program had started gaining traction, but May's name was unfamiliar. May, is she involved with one of the families? Elon asked, his curiosity piqued. Yes, she's one of the mothers who use the platform. But here's the thing. Her story's not like the others. She says that your program has saved her family in more ways than one. She has something she wants to talk about with you in person. Elon's interest was officially piqued. I'll be there in an hour, he said without hesitation, already gathering his things to head out. This was the kind of unexpected opportunity he had been waiting for. An opportunity to understand firsthand the impact of the program on the families it was meant to help. When Elon arrived at the modest house that Sarah had given him the address for, it was already late, the sun having set behind the horizon. As he stepped out of the car, he saw a woman standing in front of the house, holding a small child by her side. May, he assumed, was the woman in question. Mr. Musk, she greeted him, her voice warm but laced with gratitude. Thank you for coming. Elon smiled, feeling a sense of quiet urgency in the air. It's good to meet you, May. You mentioned you had something important to share. May nodded and ushered him inside. The house was cozy and neatly kept, and there was an undeniable sense of peace that hung in the air. As they all sat down in the living room, the child, a little girl around the age of 6, quietly played with her toys on the floor. May seemed like she had been waiting to tell this story for a long time, her eyes occasionally darting to her daughter, who was blissfully unaware of the conversation unfolding around her. May, I'm all ears, Elon said, settling into a chair, eager to hear what this woman had to say. May took a deep breath and began. You know how you're helping people with the program, right? Well, for me and my daughter, it's been life-changing. But it's more than just the help with housing or jobs. It's everything you didn't know we needed. Elon leaned in, listening intently. We lost my husband, Caden, just over a year ago. He was in the military, and he died in the line of duty. It was devastating. I found myself lost, in a dark place. I didn't know how I was going to make it with just me and Amelia, my daughter. I was working 2 jobs, but I couldn't make ends meet. I wasn't able to provide the things that Caden used to. We were barely scraping by, and I didn't want Amelia to feel it. But I saw the stress in her eyes. May paused for a moment, and Elon could see the emotion flooding back. She wiped away a tear before continuing. When I found your program, I thought, maybe this could help. But I didn't expect anything like this. The support wasn't just practical, it was personal. It felt like someone saw us, truly saw us, in a way no one had before. But there's more, Elon, she added, her voice growing softer but more urgent. Something happened last week. Amelia, she was playing outside, and she found something. It was an envelope, hidden under the bushes. It had my husband's name on it, and when I opened it, I couldn't believe what I found. Elon sat forward, his interest piqued. What was in the envelope? May reached into her purse and handed him the folded letter. It was stained with the edges of time. The paper yellowed. Elon opened it, his heart tightening as he read the handwritten message. The letter was a letter from her late husband, Caden. I know it's going to be tough, it began. But you've always been strong. Promise me you'll take care of Amelia. I don't know how much time I have left, but I want you to know that even though I'm gone, I'll always be with you. You're going to need support, more than you realize. There's something that can help, something that'll guide you. Look for the answers where others might not. You'll know when the time is right. The letter was filled with tender words from a man who had known his time was running out, but still wanted to ensure his family was taken care of. Elon glanced up at May, his mind racing. This letter was from your husband? Yes, May said quietly, a soft smile playing on her lips. And when I read it, I knew what it meant. It wasn't just about the program helping us. It was about you, your foundation, everything you've created. My husband knew this would come. He always had this belief that things would get better. And now, here we are. Amelia's got a future. I've got a future. Elon was silent for a long moment, letting the weight of May's story sink in. He had been so focused on the big picture, on the impact of his work on thousands of families, but he hadn't considered the personal stories that would unfold. This was one of those stories that would stay with him for a long time. "Thank you for sharing this with me, May," Elon said, his voice hoarse. "I had no idea that the program would touch so many lives in ways we never expected." May smiled softly and then glanced down at her daughter. "Thank you for giving us the chance to heal, to hope again." As Elon left the house that night, the weight of the moment pressed heavily on his shoulders. He had come to help, but in return, he had been reminded of the true power of human connection. What began as a simple act of kindness had turned into something far greater, a ripple that had touched lives in ways he could never have predicted. As he drove home, Elon found himself thinking about the unexpectedness of it all. He hadn't anticipated such a profound change in his own life. And yet, here he was, more committed than ever to seeing the program through, to ensuring that more families like May's would be able to rebuild their lives. The road ahead would still be challenging, but now Elon knew that every step he took was worth it. Because sometimes it wasn't the big, grand gestures that made the difference. It was the small, personal moments that mattered most. The most surprising thing you've ever heard? It's unbelievable, but it's true. How one simple action can change everything for the better. The next few weeks passed in a blur for Elon. The work on the foundation was nonstop, and the results began to pour in. More families were reaching out, more stories were being shared, more lives were being touched. But despite the success, a lingering thought stuck with him. The letter from May's late husband still echoed in his mind. Caden had known something Elon didn't. Something beyond the program's success, beyond the technicalities of funding and outreach. There was a deeper connection at play here. The feeling that something larger was guiding him, a force he couldn't quite understand. The more Elon thought about it, the more he realized how small moments, unexpected moments, had shaped his life. His decision to take that city bus, the encounter with Maddie, and now, the unexpected meeting with May and her daughter, Amelia. Elon had never been a man of superstition, but there was something undeniably serendipitous about these events. He felt like his life, once driven by the cold logic of space exploration and technology, was slowly being steered by a deeper, more profound purpose. A purpose that had nothing to do with rockets or AI, but everything to do with people. But that didn't mean the work was easy. It was far from it. And on one particularly demanding evening, as Elon sat at his desk poring over program updates, Sarah called. Her voice was tight with urgency. "Elon, you need to hear this," she said quickly. "A new development has come in. It's about one of the families. It's not just another success story. It's something much bigger." Elon's curiosity was piqued instantly. "What happened?" Sarah hesitated before continuing. "It's Amelia, May's daughter. She's been selected for a special opportunity, one that we weren't even sure was possible." "Special opportunity?" Elon repeated, his brow furrowing. "Yes," Sarah replied. "It's a scholarship, a rare chance for her to get a world-class education. It's tied to an initiative that a group of philanthropists is funding to help children from challenging backgrounds. And Amelia's story, it struck a chord with them. But here's the kicker. The selection wasn't random. They specifically requested her." Elon's heart skipped a beat. Requested her? How did they even know about her? "That's the thing, Elon. They didn't just choose her for the scholarship. They knew her story. They knew about her father's letter. They knew about the bus, the foundation, everything. They even mentioned you by name. You've somehow touched their lives without realizing it." Elon felt a mix of disbelief and awe. This wasn't just another donation or charity event. This was something more, a ripple effect that had expanded far beyond his expectations. "I need to meet with them," Elon said, his voice low but filled with determination. A few days later, Elon found himself in a private conference room with a group of influential philanthropists. They were members of a collective who had pooled together their resources to support children from underserved backgrounds, offering opportunities for education, mentorship, and growth. Mr. Musk, one of the lead philanthropists, a woman named Caroline, greeted him with a firm handshake. "We're honored to meet you. And more than that, we're grateful for what you've done. For Amelia." Elon nodded, still processing everything. "I'm just doing what I can." Caroline smiled, but there was a look in her eyes, one of deep respect. It's more than that. It's what you've inspired. Amelia's story, along with others, has shown us what real potential looks like. And when we heard about the letter her father left for her, well, we knew we had to act. Elon leaned in. What do you mean by that? The letter was a catalyst, Caroline explained. It was a message to all of us. A message that sometimes it takes just one small act to change the course of someone's life. Amelia isn't just another kid who needs help. She's a symbol of resilience, of hope, of the power of connection. We've decided to not only fund her education, but to ensure that she has everything she needs: mentorship, connections, and most importantly, the support of a community that believes in her. Elon's mind raced. He hadn't expected any of this. He had started the foundation with the goal of making a difference in the world, but he hadn't anticipated the personal connections, like Amelia's, that would change everything for him. What can I do to help? Elon asked, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Caroline looked at him, her expression softening. What you've already done is enough. You've created a wave of change. Now it's time to let Amelia ride it. We're asking for your blessing to help make this happen. We want her to have every chance to succeed, and we want you to be a part of that journey. Elon nodded slowly. Of course, Amelia deserves everything she can get. That night, as Elon walked back to his car, he found himself reflecting on the magnitude of what had just happened. Amelia's future was now brighter than ever, not just because of the scholarship, but because of the ripple effect that had started with one small act. A simple decision to help, to care, to make a difference. But what amazed him most was how his life had been transformed as well. He had gone from a man obsessed with the future of technology to someone who now understood the power of human connection. The ability to see people, not as numbers, not as cases, but as individuals with unique stories and needs. It was a humbling realization, and for the first time in a long while, Elon felt a sense of peace. Maybe this was the true purpose of his work. Not rockets, not artificial intelligence, but helping people find their way when they felt lost. As he drove home, the weight of his decisions and their impact settled over him. What had begun as a program to give back had turned into something far more powerful than he could have ever imagined. And the best part? He knew this was only the beginning. You won't believe it, but everything changed in an instant. It's a twist in the story that no one saw coming, but it was exactly what everyone needed. As the days rolled on, Elon found himself more deeply entrenched in his new mission than ever before. The wave of impact his foundation had created was only growing, and each new story that came across his desk seemed to reinforce the idea that what he had started was far more than a charitable initiative. It was a movement. One of the most powerful stories came from a small community in the heart of the city, a place that had been struggling for years but was now beginning to flourish thanks to the ripple effect sparked by Elon's unexpected involvement. There, in the heart of an area once neglected, a group of children were now benefiting from education programs, mentorship, and most importantly, hope. Elon had always been a visionary, able to look at the stars and imagine the unimaginable, but this was different. This wasn't just about reaching for the stars. This was about grounding people, giving them roots when they had none. It was about giving kids like Amelia a fighting chance at something more. Yet even as he sat in his office, reviewing the program's growth, a lingering sense of doubt remained. He had started this journey wanting to change the world, to make things right for people who hadn't been given the same opportunities as others. But in doing so, he had begun to question his own worthiness. Could one man, no matter how powerful, really change the course of so many lives? That night, as he sat alone in his study, reviewing the numbers for the latest quarter, a familiar voice broke through his thoughts. It was a call from May. "Elon," she said, her voice tired but warm. "I've been thinking a lot about everything you've done for us, and for Amelia. I can't express how grateful we are. You've changed our lives in ways I can't even begin to explain." Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers running through his hair. "I didn't do it alone, May. You and Amelia are the real reason everything started. Your story, your strength, has been the driving force behind all of this." May paused, and Elon could hear the quiet sobs of Amelia in the background. It had been a long day, and from the sounds of it, they were both still adjusting to the new reality of their lives. The house, the scholarship, the changes that had unfolded so rapidly. "I know," May said, her voice cracking, "but there's something I need to tell you. Something that's been on my mind." Elon's curiosity piqued. "What is it?" "It's about Amelia," she began, her words slow but deliberate. She's struggling. I think she's carrying a lot more than she lets on. The transition has been hard for her. She's always been independent, but I can't see the weight of everything. Losing her father, adjusting to this new life, it's starting to get to her." Elon felt a pang of concern. He knew that children were resilient, but Amelia had been through so much already. The loss of her father, the sudden changes in her environment. It was only natural for her to feel overwhelmed. "I'll talk to her," Elon said, his voice full of assurance. "Maybe we can figure out a way to help." May sighed. "I think what she needs right now is something simple. She needs to know she's not alone. She needs to know there's someone who cares about her, not because of what they can give her, but because they genuinely want to help her heal." Elon thought about those words for a moment. It was a stark reminder that, no matter how much money or resources he could provide, what children like Amelia needed most was emotional support, stability, and love. "I'll be there tomorrow," he said firmly. "I'll take her out for the day. Maybe we can do something normal, something she's always wanted to do but never had the chance. We'll figure this out together." The next morning, Elon made good on his promise. He reached out to May, and together they decided that a trip to the park would be the best way to give Amelia the space to breathe and talk. They spent the day strolling through the vast, sunlit grounds, with Elon making sure to ask her questions. Questions that didn't feel like an interrogation, but rather an open invitation for her to share whatever was on her mind. As they sat down on a bench, Amelia looked up at Elon, her eyes wide but soft. "Do you think it's okay to be scared sometimes?" she asked, her voice quiet. Elon smiled gently. "I think it's more than okay. It's part of being human. We all get scared sometimes, even when we don't show it. The important thing is not to face it alone." Amelia nodded slowly, taking in his words. There was a quiet understanding between them, an unspoken bond that had begun to form in the weeks following their first meeting. It wasn't just about charity. It was about caring, really caring. It was about seeing the child behind the struggles, seeing Amelia as more than just a victim of circumstances, but as a young girl with her own hopes and dreams. "Do you want to talk about your dad?" Elon asked, his tone gentle. Amelia's gaze shifted downward, the weight of her emotions flickering across her face. "I miss him," she whispered. "I don't know how to stop missing him." Elon's heart ached. He wanted to say something that would take away her pain, but he knew there was no magic solution. Instead, he placed a hand on her shoulder, offering a comforting touch. "I can't imagine how hard that must be," Elon said softly. "But you don't have to carry that alone, either. You have people who care about you, and I'm one of those people. I'll always be here for you, Amelia." In that moment, Amelia smiled, a small, tentative smile, but it was a start. And for Elon, that smile was everything. He had come into this journey thinking he was here to help others, but now, he realized that he, too, was being helped in return. The healing was mutual. It wasn't about the technology, the rockets, or the artificial intelligence. It was about the connections that bound people together, the moments of vulnerability that brought out the best in everyone. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park, Elon made a promise to himself. This wasn't just a project. This wasn't just charity. This was family. And no matter how far he reached in his pursuits, he would never lose sight of what truly mattered: the people who needed him most. And as for Amelia, he knew that her journey was far from over, but he was determined to walk it with her, step by step. That's it. The moment you think you have it all figured out, life throws something completely unexpected your way. The next few weeks felt like a blur to Elon. His work at SpaceX, his ongoing endeavors with Neuralink, and his focus on philanthropy had all intensified. Yet, in the midst of it all, his thoughts frequently drifted back to Amelia and her journey. The promise he had made to be there for her weighed heavily on his mind, and he found himself carving out time in his often chaotic schedule to ensure that he could keep his word. But what Elon didn't anticipate was just how challenging it would be. Amelia's story, her resilience, and the reality of her life were so much more complicated than even he had imagined. Every time they spoke or met, he saw the weight she carried, and it broke his heart. The quiet mornings spent walking through the park, the times they sat together and talked, had helped, slowly, but there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. Amelia was still trying to navigate a world that had felt upended, and she still struggled to express what was really going on inside her. It was on one of these days, as Elon made his way to his car after a meeting, that his assistant, Grace, approached him with an urgent look in her eyes. "Elon, I think you should take a look at this," Grace said, holding up her phone. The screen displayed an article headline that caught Elon off guard. "The Forgotten Daughter: How One Little Girl's Story Turned into a Movement." Elon felt a knot form in his stomach. He had been keeping a low profile when it came to Amelia's situation, preferring to help quietly, without the public fanfare. But now, here it was, splashed across the headlines. A picture of Amelia, taken during one of their visits to the park, accompanied the article. "This is not what I expected," Elon muttered, scrolling through the piece. The journalist had written about the good intentions behind his efforts to help Amelia, framing it as part of a larger narrative about his philanthropic work. But the article also painted him as a savior, a title Elon had never wanted. "I didn't know this was going public," Elon said, handing Grace the phone. "We have to make sure this narrative doesn't get twisted. It's not about me." Grace nodded but didn't speak. She knew better than anyone that Elon was fiercely protective of his privacy and his motives, but she also knew that his influence meant that any public acknowledgement could have far-reaching consequences. The media had a way of distorting even the noblest of actions. Elon took a deep breath, pulling his hoodie tighter around his shoulders as he stepped out of the car. "We need to address this. It's important that people understand why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's not about heroism. It's about doing what's right." As he walked into his office, his mind continued to race. The last thing he wanted was for Amelia's story to become fodder for clickbait or sensationalism. She was a child who had been through enough trauma. She didn't need to be objectified for the sake of a headline. Yet, here he was, suddenly at the center of a storm he didn't know how to navigate. That evening, after a long day of meetings and press briefings, Elon found himself sitting alone in his study, pondering his next move. The article about Amelia lingered in his thoughts, but it was the growing sense of unease within him that gnawed at him the most. He couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that he was drifting further away from the original purpose of his involvement in this story. What had started as an act of kindness toward a lost girl had now turned into something far bigger. A part of him was unsure whether he was prepared for the consequences of this new reality. And even as his mind wrestled with the complexity of his choices, he couldn't help but think back to that moment on the subway when he first met Amelia, the instant his life took a turn he hadn't anticipated. He had given his word, and no matter how challenging the journey was becoming, he knew he couldn't back down. The next day, Elon arrived at May and Amelia's new home, determined to spend time with them without any distractions. The media frenzy was already starting to cool, but it was clear that Amelia was still adjusting to the new reality. She seemed quieter than usual, her thoughts distant, and Elon could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "Hey, Amelia," he greeted her softly as he entered the living room. He sat down beside her on the couch, trying to keep the mood light. "How's your week been?" Amelia didn't immediately respond, her fingers tracing the edges of her teddy bear. Elon could sense the shift. There was something she wasn't saying. Something had changed. Finally, after a long pause, she looked up at him. "You're going to leave, aren't you?" she asked, her voice so small it nearly broke him. Elon's heart clenched, but he forced a smile. "What do you mean? I'm not going anywhere." "You'll forget about me," Amelia said softly, "just like everyone else. You'll get busy with your big projects, and I'll be left behind." The vulnerability in her voice cut through him. She was afraid of being abandoned, afraid that once the spotlight shifted away, so would the people who had promised to be there for her. Elon felt the weight of her words, realizing just how deep her insecurities ran. He had to show her that this wasn't just another passing gesture. He had to prove that his commitment wasn't just a fleeting moment of kindness. It was something that would last, no matter how busy or complicated his life became. "I won't forget about you, Amelia," Elon said, his voice firm but gentle. "And I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that." He leaned forward, meeting her eyes with sincerity. "We're in this together, okay? No matter what. You and me." Amelia didn't respond immediately, but she reached out, taking his hand in hers. The small gesture meant everything to him, signaling that, for the first time in a long while, Amelia was starting to believe in the possibility of something more stable, something real. As they sat together, side by side, Elon realized that this journey wasn't just about offering solutions or making grand gestures. It was about being present. It was about showing up, even when the world around him seemed to be falling apart. And as Amelia rested her head on his shoulder, Elon made a vow to himself that he would do whatever it took to keep that promise. No matter the cost, no matter the challenge, he wouldn't let her face the world alone anymore. Have you ever imagined how a single moment could change everything? This was one of those moments. The following weeks brought more than just challenges for Elon and Amelia. They also brought clarity. As much as Elon had wanted to help, he now realized that even the best intentions couldn't always shield a child from the complexities of her world. Amelia's progress was slow, and with every step forward, she seemed to take 2 steps back. Her mother, May, was grateful for the stability that Elon had brought into their lives. The new house, the quiet neighborhood, and the promise of a better future were all part of the healing process. But there was a deeper struggle within Amelia that even Elon wasn't prepared for. A sense of abandonment that ran deep and was more difficult to mend than any of them had anticipated. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Elon received a call from Grace, his assistant, urging him to come to the house as soon as possible. Something was wrong. When Elon arrived at the house, he could immediately sense the tension in the air. May was sitting in the living room, looking drained, her eyes red from crying. Amelia was nowhere to be found. "What happened?" Elon asked, his heart skipping a beat as he looked at May, who was visibly shaken. I don't know," May whispered, her voice cracking. "Amelia, she disappeared. She was just here, playing in her room. I went to check on her, and she was gone." Elon's stomach sank. He tried to calm himself, but panic was already creeping in. He immediately checked the backyard, the kitchen, even the garage, but there was no sign of Amelia. "Have you called the police?" Elon asked, trying to focus on the practical steps. "I did," May replied, her voice small and fragile. "But I'm so scared, Elon. What if she's gone again? Like before." The memory of the subway, the sense of isolation Amelia had felt when she first encountered Elon, came rushing back. He couldn't bear the thought of her being lost or frightened, all alone once again. His heart ached as he thought about the fear Amelia must be feeling. How could she trust that this time it was different? That this time she wouldn't be left behind? "Don't worry, May," Elon said, his voice steady despite the rising fear. "We'll find her. I won't let anything happen to her." As the minutes turned into hours, the situation only grew more tense. The police arrived soon after Elon, and they began to search the surrounding areas, canvassing the neighborhood and asking everyone if they had seen a young girl wandering alone. But there were no leads, and the sense of helplessness weighed heavily on all of them. In the midst of the search, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He had never experienced a situation like this. He had faced challenges with rockets, electric cars, and artificial intelligence. But this was different. It was personal, and no amount of technology could solve it. As dawn approached, Elon found himself sitting alone in the living room, his mind racing. He couldn't stop thinking about Amelia, about her small face and the vulnerability she carried. How had she gotten here? What had triggered this sudden disappearance? It was then that his phone rang. He didn't recognize the number, but something in his gut told him that this call could be important. He picked up the phone, his hands slightly trembling. "Elon Musk?" a voice on the other end asked. "We've found your daughter." Elon's breath caught in his throat. "Amelia?" he asked, almost unable to believe what he was hearing. "Yes," the officer on the other end confirmed. She's safe. She's with us now. She showed up at the local park. We're bringing her to the station. Elon's relief was immediate, but there was something more, something deeper. Amelia had left the house, left her new home, all on her own. What was it that drove her to leave, to venture out into the world, despite everything? He hung up the phone quickly, telling May the news as calmly as he could. The police were already on their way to the station, and Elon promised to meet them there. When Elon arrived at the police station, he found Amelia sitting in a small room with Officer Parker, the same officer who had helped with the initial search. Amelia's face was streaked with tears, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked smaller than usual, as if the weight of the world had taken an even heavier toll on her. "Elon," Amelia whispered, her voice shaky. He sat down beside her, offering her a comforting smile. "Amelia, you're okay now. You're safe." Amelia didn't respond, her small hands clutching the edge of the chair as if trying to hold herself together. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, barely audible. "I just wanted to. I thought if I left, maybe I could fix everything. Maybe I could make things better." Elon's heart broke as he heard the words tumble from her lips. She was so young, yet she carried so much on her shoulders. The fear of being abandoned had overwhelmed her to the point where she felt the need to run, to escape whatever she couldn't understand. And for a moment, Elon realized just how much Amelia was trying to make sense of her world on her own. "You don't have to fix anything, Amelia," Elon said softly, his voice full of compassion. "You're not alone in this anymore. We're going to face everything together, okay?" But Amelia was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to stop feeling like this." Elon gently placed his hand on hers, offering her the support she so desperately needed. "You don't have to stop feeling anything. It's okay to feel what you feel, but you don't have to face it alone. I'm here. We're here." In that moment, Elon understood that Amelia's journey was not just about finding safety or stability. It was about healing from the trauma of her past, from the abandonment she had felt, from the fear that had plagued her for so long. And that, he realized, was something that would take time, patience, and unwavering support. "I won't leave you," Elon promised, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Not now. Not ever." As they sat together in the quiet room, with only the hum of the station around them, Elon realized that no amount of success or achievement could ever compare to the profound responsibility he had to this little girl. The journey ahead would be difficult, but it was one he would walk alongside her every step of the way. And with that, a new chapter began, for both of them. What if the hardest part of healing isn't the pain, but learning how to trust again? The following days were a blur for Elon and Amelia. They had returned home, but the air in the house felt heavy, thick with unspoken fears and uncertainties. May tried her best to reassure both of them, but there was a quiet sadness in her eyes, an exhaustion that seemed to seep into every corner of the house. Amelia, meanwhile, had withdrawn into herself even more. The initial relief of being found was fading, replaced by an overwhelming sense of guilt. She wasn't just afraid of being abandoned. She was now grappling with a deeper feeling that her actions had somehow let everyone down. Elon tried to speak with her, to console her, but she barely responded. She didn't want to talk about what had happened. She didn't want to talk about what she was feeling. The little girl who had once reached for his hand now avoided his gaze, retreating further into herself. One evening, after dinner, Elon found himself staring out the window, watching the sunset. His mind kept returning to the night Amelia had left the house. How scared she must have been, how desperate to escape the feelings that had been overwhelming her. He couldn't help but wonder if there was more he could have done, more that he had missed. As his thoughts swirled, his phone buzzed on the table. It was a message from Grace, his assistant, asking him to come to the office early the next morning. Elon had a tendency to push his personal life aside when work piled up, but this time, he knew he couldn't afford to ignore it. His thoughts were consumed by Amelia. She needed him, but he didn't know how to be there for her without pushing her away. The next morning, Elon found himself at his desk early, surrounded by paperwork, emails, and the usual chaos of his many ventures. But no matter how hard he tried to focus on the work in front of him, his mind kept drifting back to the house, to Amelia. He had always been someone who thrived on logic, on structure, numbers, and solutions. But here, with Amelia, he found himself lost. There was no equation, no formula to fix this situation. The path forward wasn't clear, and the helplessness he felt was something he hadn't experienced in years. Elon had been thinking a lot about what May had said that day, the day he first offered to help them, when she spoke of her struggles. Amelia wasn't the only one with a heavy heart. May had been through so much, too. Losing her husband to cancer had been devastating, but raising Amelia alone, working 2 jobs just to survive, had left her exhausted. It was clear that they both needed healing. Healing that Elon wasn't sure he could provide, but he couldn't give up. By mid-afternoon, Elon made the decision to go back home. He told Grace to reschedule his meetings, and as he drove back to the house, his thoughts were fixed on one thing. He needed to help Amelia find a way to trust again. When he arrived, he found May in the kitchen, sitting at the table, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea. She looked up at him with a tired smile, but there was an underlying worry in her expression. "Is everything okay?" Elon asked, already sensing the tension in the air. May sighed. "I'm just worried about her, Elon. I know she's been through a lot, but I don't know how to reach her. It's like she's shutting down, and I don't know how to fix it." Elon nodded, feeling the weight of her words. It was true. Amelia had become more withdrawn as the days went on. She wasn't playing, she wasn't talking, and she wasn't even looking at him anymore. The connection that had once felt so strong seemed to be slipping away, and Elon wasn't sure how to hold on to it. "I know you're doing everything you can," Elon said gently, "but maybe she needs time. It's not easy, trying to navigate all of this." "I just feel like I'm failing her," May whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "She needs me, but I don't know how to give her what she needs. I'm so tired, Elon, and I don't want her to think I'm giving up." Elon's heart clenched as he looked at May. She had carried so much on her own, and now she was carrying the weight of Amelia's fear as well. It wasn't just about giving her a stable home. It was about providing the emotional support that Amelia needed to feel safe again. "I'm not going anywhere," Elon said firmly, "and neither are you. We'll get through this together." But despite his reassurances, Elon couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He needed to do more. He needed to figure out what was keeping Amelia from opening up, from healing. That evening, Elon decided to take a different approach. He found Amelia in her room, sitting on the floor with her back against the wall. Her head was down, her small hands twisting the hem of her shirt. "Hey," Elon said softly, sitting down beside her. "Can we talk?" Amelia didn't look up. She didn't respond. But Elon didn't give up. He sat there in silence, letting the moment stretch out until he finally spoke again. "You know, I've been thinking," Elon started, trying to find the right words. "When I was growing up, I didn't have a lot of people to talk to. Sometimes, I'd feel like I was all alone in the world. I didn't know how to deal with it." Amelia shifted, her eyes flickering toward him, though she didn't say anything. "Do you ever feel that way, Amelia?" Elon continued. "Like there's no one to talk to? Like you're all alone?" Amelia didn't respond immediately, but after a long pause, she whispered, "Sometimes." "I understand," Elon said quietly, "but you're not alone. Not anymore. And I promise, I'll always be here to listen." For the first time in days, Elon saw a flicker of something in Amelia's eyes, something other than sadness or fear. It was a moment of vulnerability, but it was a start. "I'm scared," Amelia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon leaned in closer. "Scared of what?" "I don't know how to make everything better. I don't know how to make it stop hurting." Elon felt a lump form in his throat. This was the moment he had been waiting for, where he could reach her, where he could show her that it was okay to feel, to hurt, and to let others help. "You don't have to fix everything," Elon said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to make it all go away. You just have to let people in. You just have to trust that we'll be here for you, no matter what." Amelia looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. For a moment, the walls between them seemed to dissolve, and Elon could see the fear, the loneliness, and the hope in her eyes all at once. And in that moment, he realized that they had made progress, not in leaps and bounds, but in small, fragile steps. Healing was a journey, and it wouldn't happen overnight. But with patience, love, and support, they would find their way back to each other. "I'm here for you, Amelia," Elon said quietly, "and I always will be." And with that, a tiny glimmer of trust began to grow in Amelia's heart. It was the beginning of a new chapter, for both of them. Sometimes the smallest step in the right direction ends up being the biggest step of your life. The days following that quiet conversation with Amelia were filled with small breakthroughs. The silence that had hung between Elon and her seemed to ease, though the weight of the past still lingered in the corners of the house. It was a slow and delicate dance, one where patience was more important than words. Amelia had started to open up, but only in fleeting moments. She began to draw again, her tiny fingers clutching crayons and markers as she filled pages with drawings of colorful landscapes and strange creatures. Elon noticed that most of her art included people. Lots of people, some of them smiling, some of them with tears. He couldn't help but wonder if these figures were representations of her own feelings, her attempt to make sense of the chaos that had overtaken her life. Elon had also started to spend more time with May, trying to understand her struggles better. It wasn't easy for him to imagine the kind of stress she was under, working 2 jobs, raising a daughter on her own, and still carrying the grief of losing her husband. Yet, as he listened to her talk about the challenges she faced every day, he realized that his wealth and resources could offer more than just a financial safety net for them. It could give them peace of mind, something far more valuable than material things. He had already set up therapy sessions for both of them, and he was determined to help them heal, not just from the traumatic events they had endured, but from the everyday struggles that had been wearing them down long before Amelia's disappearance. But despite all his efforts, there was a growing sense of tension in the house. Elon felt it most when he would wake up early in the morning and find May staring blankly out the window, her cup of coffee long forgotten, as if she were lost in a maze of thoughts too complicated to untangle. He couldn't blame her for it. She was tired, emotionally, physically, mentally. But he knew he had to do something to help her, too. One Saturday morning, as the sunlight streamed into the living room, Elon decided to confront the issue head-on. He walked into the kitchen where May was preparing breakfast, and after a long moment of quiet observation, he spoke. "May," Elon began, his voice gentle but firm, "I can't keep watching you struggle. You're doing everything for Amelia, but you're not taking care of yourself. You can't pour from an empty cup." May stiffened, her hands pausing mid-action. She didn't meet his eyes at first, but slowly, she put down the knife she had been holding. "I don't have a choice, Elon," she said quietly, her voice tinged with frustration. "I'm just trying to keep us afloat. I don't have time to think about myself." "I get it," Elon replied. "But this isn't just about surviving, May. It's about living. And you deserve that, just as much as Amelia does." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Then May finally looked up at him, her eyes tired, but grateful. "I know you're right," she said softly, her voice breaking just slightly. "I've been so focused on keeping everything together, I forgot what it felt like to actually live." Elon reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. "Let me help you, May. You don't have to do this alone." There was a long pause, but eventually, May nodded, her hand squeezing his in silent agreement. It was a small step, but it was one that would make a world of difference. Later that afternoon, Elon decided to take a break from the weight of his work and spend the day with Amelia. They went to the park, a place where, for a few hours, nothing mattered except the simple joy of being outside, breathing fresh air, and watching the world go by. Elon had noticed how much Amelia loved the swings, so he pushed her higher and higher, listening to her giggles as she soared through the air. It was a moment of pure innocence, and for the first time in a long while, Elon allowed himself to forget everything else. There was no Mars, no AI, no business ventures, just the sound of Amelia's laughter, the sun warming their faces, and the feeling that, maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Later, as they sat on a bench together, Amelia turned to him, her face soft and vulnerable. "Elon," she said, her voice barely audible. Do you think I'll ever feel okay again?" Elon looked at her, his heart aching. He wanted to say the perfect thing, something that would erase all the pain, all the fear she had carried with her. But he knew that healing wasn't something you could promise in a single sentence. It was something that took time. But he could give her this, his unwavering support. "I can't promise you it will happen overnight," he said gently, "but I can promise you that I'll be here every step of the way. And together, we'll find a way to heal. It's okay to not be okay sometimes." Amelia smiled faintly, a small glimmer of trust in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. That evening, after they returned home, Elon sat down with May to discuss the next steps. It was time for them to take a real break, time to heal, to reset, and to focus on themselves as a family. "I've been thinking about something," Elon began. "How would you feel about taking a few days off? A proper vacation, somewhere far from everything, just the three of us. I think it could help all of us." May looked at him, surprised by the suggestion, but after a moment of reflection, she nodded. "Maybe it's what we need. I'm willing to try." And so, they made plans. Plans to get away for a little while and allow themselves to heal, not as individuals, but as a family. It wasn't the answer to everything, but it was a start. As Elon looked out the window that evening, he couldn't help but feel a sense of hope growing inside him. Maybe it wasn't about having all the answers right away. Maybe it was about taking the time to care for each other, to rebuild trust, and to embrace the healing process, however long it took. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a while, Elon felt like they were moving in the right direction. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for someone is to simply be there. The days leading up to their planned getaway were filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. May hadn't taken a real vacation in years. The thought of escaping the daily grind, even for just a few days, was both a relief and a challenge for her. She was so used to the weight of responsibility that the idea of letting go felt foreign, even overwhelming. But Elon's offer, gentle yet persistent, had convinced her that it might be just what they needed. Amelia, on the other hand, seemed to sense the change in the air. The day after their conversation at the park, she woke up with a spark of energy that Elon hadn't seen in her for a long time. She rushed to the window, her small hands pressed against the cool glass, eyes wide with anticipation. "Elon, are we really going somewhere?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. "Yes, sweetheart," he replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. "We're going to take a little trip, just the three of us. Somewhere we can relax and have fun." Amelia's face lit up, her excitement bubbling over. "Are we going to the beach? Or maybe the mountains?" Elon chuckled softly, kneeling down to her level. "I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but I promise you, it's going to be a place where we can all take a deep breath and forget about everything else for a little while." For the next few days, the house was filled with the sound of packing, clothes, toiletries, and a small suitcase filled with Amelia's favorite toys. Elon had taken care of the arrangements for them, booking a cozy cabin in the mountains, away from the chaos of city life. The quiet, serene surroundings would offer them the peace they so desperately needed. As the day of departure drew closer, Elon found himself feeling more hopeful than he had in a long time. He realized that this vacation wasn't just about giving May and Amelia a break. It was about giving himself a chance to reconnect with the things that truly mattered: family, healing, and the importance of being present. On the day they were to leave, Elon woke up early, eager to get the day started. He found May in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, looking slightly less tired than usual. "Good morning," he said, offering her a warm smile. "Ready for our adventure?" May nodded, though there was a hint of hesitation in her eyes. "I think I'm as ready as I'll ever be." They packed up the last of their things, and by midday, they were on their way. The car ride was filled with a quiet kind of excitement. Amelia sat in the back seat, gazing out the window as the city gave way to rolling hills and vast stretches of open land. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the horizon. As they reached the cabin, Elon could see the relief on both May and Amelia's faces. The cabin was nestled at the foot of a mountain, surrounded by towering trees and peaceful silence. It was a stark contrast to the noise of their everyday lives. "This is perfect," May said quietly as she took in the view. "It's so quiet." Elon nodded, feeling the tension that had been in the air for so long start to lift. Sometimes, silence is exactly what we need. The cabin was simple but cozy, with a warm fireplace and large windows that allowed them to look out over the mountain. As they unpacked, Elon made sure to take care of the small details, setting up a fire in the hearth, laying out the blankets, and making sure there was plenty of hot chocolate for Amelia. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make them feel at home. That evening, they sat together around the fire, the soft crackle of the flames filling the room. Elon watched as May and Amelia exchanged quiet smiles, the bond between them stronger than ever. For a moment, everything felt right. No worries about work, no lingering fears about the future, just the warmth of family and the promise of better days ahead. "Elon, can we go for a walk tomorrow?" Amelia asked, her voice hopeful. "Of course," he replied, smiling. "We can explore the woods, see the animals, maybe even pick some wildflowers. Whatever you want." Amelia grinned. "I want to see a deer." "We'll see what we can find," Elon promised. As the night drew on, they all sat quietly, each lost in their own thoughts, yet connected in a way that felt more real than any conversation they had shared before. In the flickering light of the fire, Elon realized that, even though the road ahead was still uncertain, they had already made the most important step. They had chosen to be there for each other, fully and without hesitation. The next morning, they woke up early, the fresh mountain air invigorating them as they stepped outside. The world was still quiet, save for the soft chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves. Amelia, her face full of wonder, led the way down the trail, her little feet kicking up dust as she ran ahead. Elon and May followed behind, the weight of their past struggles momentarily forgotten as they watched Amelia laugh and play, her joy contagious. For a few precious hours, they were just a family, no longer bound by the heaviness of the world around them, but free to enjoy each other's company and the simple beauty of nature. It was on that walk that Elon realized something profound. Sometimes, the most meaningful moments weren't the grand gestures or the sweeping acts of kindness. Sometimes it was about the quiet moments, the simple act of being there, of offering your presence without any expectation. He had spent so much of his life focused on the future, on big ideas and ambitious plans, but now, for the first time, he understood the value of simply living in the present. As they returned to the cabin later that day, tired but content, Elon looked at May and Amelia with a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. They were starting over, yes, but they were doing it together. And that, he realized, was all that truly mattered. When you take the time to listen, you might just hear the things that matter the most. The next few days at the cabin passed in a blur of laughter, hikes, and quiet moments that seemed to stretch on forever. Elon found himself feeling more grounded than he had in months. The mountain air cleared his mind, the natural beauty around them giving him the kind of peace he hadn't known he needed. With each passing day, he could feel the walls he had built around himself slowly crumbling, replaced by a sense of connection that he had been missing for too long. May had begun to open up in ways that surprised him. She had always been the strong, silent type, but there was something about the serene setting that seemed to unlock parts of her he hadn't seen before. On their second evening there, as they sat outside watching the stars, Elon decided to ask the question that had been lingering in the back of his mind. "May," he began, his voice low and tentative, "I've been wondering, how have you been really holding up?" She glanced at him, her expression softening. It was the first time he had asked her directly, and the sincerity in his voice made her pause. She took a deep breath before replying. "I guess I've just been surviving, she said, her voice quieter than usual. "I've been so focused on making sure Amelia is okay that I forgot to check in with myself." Elon nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. He could relate. He had been so wrapped up in his own work and dreams of the future that he often neglected the present, the people who were right in front of him. "May, I can't imagine what it's been like for you. The past year, everything you've gone through. But I want you to know that you don't have to carry it all alone. Not anymore." She turned her gaze to the fire, watching the flames dance in the cool night air. Her shoulders seemed to sag slightly, as if the weight of everything she had been carrying was finally starting to show. "I've never been one to ask for help," she said, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "I thought I could do it all. But sometimes it feels like I'm falling apart." Elon leaned forward, his eyes locking with hers. "You don't have to do it all, May. You've been doing your best. That's enough. But you don't have to do it alone." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the crackling of the fire filling the space between them. Elon could see the quiet relief in her eyes. It was as if, for the first time in a long while, she was allowing herself to feel the support she had been denying herself. And then, unexpectedly, May spoke again. "I never told you the whole story about my husband, did I?" she asked, her voice hesitant. Elon shook his head, the weight of her words already evident. "No, I didn't think to ask," he said quietly. "I'm sorry." She gave a small smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "It's okay. I didn't know how to talk about it, but I think it's time. I don't want to carry it anymore." Elon's heart ached for her as she began to share the story of her late husband. It was a story of love, loss, and the unimaginable pain of raising a child alone. She spoke of their dreams for the future, of how they had always planned to raise Amelia in a home filled with laughter and joy. But cancer had changed everything, taking him far too soon. "I never expected to be in this position," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I never thought I'd be raising Amelia without him. I guess I didn't know how to keep going. I didn't know how to be both the mother and the father." Elon listened in silence, his heart heavy with empathy. There was nothing he could say to take away her pain, but in that moment, he understood. He understood what it meant to lose someone important, what it felt like to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, even when you didn't know how to. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," he said gently. "I can see it in the way you take care of Amelia. She's a lucky girl to have you." May looked at him, her eyes glistening with tears she hadn't shed in so long. "Thank you, Elon, for listening." It wasn't a grand gesture, but it was enough. Sometimes that was all someone needed. Someone who was willing to listen, someone who cared enough to understand. The conversation lingered in the air long after they had finished talking. It felt like a weight had been lifted, not just from May's shoulders, but from both of them. For the first time in a long time, they were sharing a moment of honesty, a moment of true connection. The next day, they took a long walk through the woods, Amelia leading the way as usual, her infectious laughter echoing through the trees. They stopped by a stream, the clear water rushing over rocks, and spent hours skipping stones and talking. There was no rush to be anywhere, no deadlines or meetings waiting for them. Just the quiet of nature and the joy of being together. That evening, as they sat down to a simple dinner, May turned to Elon with a soft smile. "You know," she said, "I'm really glad we did this. I needed this more than I realized." Elon smiled back, his heart full. "I'm glad you're here. And I'm glad we're doing this together." For a moment, everything felt right. The cabin, the mountains, the quiet moments of shared laughter and stories. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were living. Together. Sometimes, the smallest moments have the power to change everything. The next few weeks passed in a haze of new experiences for Elon, May, and Amelia. What had started as a brief escape from the demands of life had slowly become something much more profound, a real turning point for all of them. They had found something more valuable than peace. They had found a kind of healing that only came when you allowed yourself to truly stop and breathe. Each day, Elon found himself learning more about the two women who had unexpectedly become a part of his life. Amelia's boundless curiosity kept them all on their toes, and her endless questions about space, robots, and the future always led to interesting and often hilarious discussions. Elon had never been one to slow down and explain things in simple terms, but for her, he found himself breaking down his work into fun, kid-friendly concepts. He didn't mind. There was something about her wide-eyed wonder that made him see his world through a different lens. For May, things were different. She had been cautious at first, hesitant to lean too heavily on the support Elon had offered. But over time, The walls she had built up began to crumble. It wasn't just about her grief anymore. It was about building a future where she didn't have to be everything at once. One evening, after a quiet dinner, May turned to Elon, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Elon, I've been thinking," she began, her voice tentative, "about what you said before about not doing this alone. I don't want to hold you back, but what if we don't go back to the way things were?" Elon furrowed his brow, unsure of where she was heading. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she said, her words coming slowly, "I've been so focused on making sure Amelia is okay that I forgot about myself. I've been holding on to the past, to things I can't change. Maybe it's time I started thinking about what I want. What we want as a family." Elon smiled warmly, his heart swelling. He could see how much this meant to her. He could feel her coming alive, stepping out of the shadows of her grief and embracing the possibility of a new chapter. "I think that's a beautiful idea," he said softly, "but you don't have to do it alone. Not anymore. Whatever you decide, I'm here." For the first time since they had met, May allowed herself to fully embrace the idea of starting fresh. It wasn't about forgetting the past. It never would be. But it was about finding joy in the present and trusting that the future didn't have to be a burden. The following morning, they sat on the porch, sipping their coffee as the sun rose over the mountains. The quiet of the morning felt different now, less like a temporary escape and more like the beginning of something lasting. Elon looked at May and Amelia, and for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he was rushing towards some big goal or ambitious dream. For once, he was simply here. "I've been thinking about something too," Elon said, his voice thoughtful. "About the future, I mean. My work, the things I'm involved in. They're important, but there's something about all this, about you too, that makes me realize how much I've been missing. I've been so focused on building things, on changing the world, that I forgot to appreciate the moments that really matter." May turned to him, her eyes soft with understanding. "We're right here, Elon. And you're part of this now, too. Not just in the way you've helped us, but in the way we're all helping each other grow." Elon nodded, feeling the weight of her words. He realized now, more than ever, that success wasn't just about what you could accomplish in the world. It was about the relationships you built, the people you surrounded yourself with, and the moments you shared. As the days went on, Elon began to make more concrete plans for the future, not just for his work, but for his life with May and Amelia. They had spent so much time in the cabin that they had almost forgotten about the real world outside. But now, it was time to return. And as much as Elon was excited to get back to his projects, he knew that his life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. A few weeks later, after a long conversation with May, Elon decided to take another step in his commitment to their future. He had been thinking about a house, a real home for them to build memories in. The cabin had been a sanctuary, but it was temporary. May needed something more permanent, something where she and Amelia could feel safe, grounded, and free from the constant weight of uncertainty. One afternoon, after a long day of hiking, Elon took May to see a house he had been eyeing for some time. It was a modest home, nestled in the heart of a quiet neighborhood. The kind of place that didn't scream wealth or luxury, but comfort and warmth. He knew it was the right fit for them. "This is it," Elon said softly as they stood in front of the house, a slight breeze rustling the leaves of the trees nearby. "I've already taken care of everything. It's yours, if you want it." May looked at him, her eyes wide in disbelief. "Elon, this is so much. Why would you?" "Because I want you to have the peace you deserve," he replied gently. "Because I want to help you build something for Amelia, for both of you. You've been through so much, and it's time for you to start fresh." Tears welled in May's eyes as she stepped forward, taking his hand. "I don't know what to say, except thank you. I don't know what we would have done without you." Elon smiled, his heart full. "You don't have to say anything. You're family now." Sometimes the greatest gifts come not wrapped in boxes, but in moments that change everything. The days leading up to the move into the new house were filled with a flurry of activity. Boxes were packed, furniture was sorted, and there was a tangible sense of excitement that filled the air. Elon, who was usually the one orchestrating projects of monumental scale, found himself joyfully involved in the small, personal details. He was helping to assemble furniture, picking out paint colors for the walls, and even putting together a little reading nook in Amelia's room. May had never imagined her life would come to this. A new home, a new beginning, with a sense of stability she had long yearned for. Her emotions were a whirlwind, but they were mostly filled with gratitude. Gratitude for the chance to give Amelia a childhood that didn't feel like it was being lived on a tightrope, always balanced between the stress of survival and the hope of better days. Amelia, for her part, was thrilled with the idea of a new home. She excitedly picked out her own bedroom decor, filling it with posters of her favorite animals and a cozy reading chair she insisted on picking out herself. It wasn't just about the house. It was about creating a place where she could feel secure, where she could dream and grow without fear. The night before the big move, the three of them sat around the table, eating pizza, laughing, and talking about their hopes for the future. For the first time in a long time, it felt like they were a real family. The weight of the past seemed to lift, just for a moment, as they looked forward to what the future held. May smiled at Elon, a soft warmth in her eyes. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm excited. Excited for Amelia to have her own room, to finally have space to breathe. And to be able to breathe myself. Elon nodded, leaning back in his chair. I'm glad I could be a part of that. But I have to say, this family we're building is the most fulfilling thing I've done in years. Amelia, who had been lost in her own thoughts, suddenly piped up. You know what, Elon? When I grow up, I want to do something just like you. Elon raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, and what exactly would that be? I want to make the world better, she said earnestly. I want to build rockets and robots and help people like you do. Elon chuckled, his heart swelling with pride. Well, you've got the right idea. Just make sure you're also having fun while you do it. Amelia grinned, clearly pleased with herself. I'll try, but I think I'll always be better at building things out of Legos than actual rockets. May laughed, and for a brief moment, it felt like everything in the world was as it should be. It was a simple, perfect moment, a family together, surrounded by love and hope. The next day, they moved into their new home. It wasn't a grand mansion, but it didn't need to be. What mattered was that it was a place where they could start fresh, a place that was theirs. As they walked through the front door for the first time, Amelia gasped. It's so big, she exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. She ran through the living room, her small feet echoing on the hardwood floors. I love it. I can run around and never hit anything. May watched her daughter with a smile, her heart swelling as she realized that this was exactly what Amelia needed. Space to grow, space to dream. And for the first time in a long while, May realized that she had that same space for herself. Elon watched them both, standing quietly in the doorway. There was something so peaceful about this moment. Seeing May and Amelia in their new home, watching as they embraced this new chapter. It wasn't about his wealth or his achievements. It was about this. About helping them find their footing. About being part of something bigger than himself. Are you okay? May asked, her voice soft, interrupting his thoughts. Elon blinked, realizing he had been lost in his own world. Yeah, he said, a smile spreading across his face. I'm just happy. Happy to see you both so excited. Amelia popped her head into the room, holding up a small stuffed bear. Elon, I'm going to name this one Mars. It's like a mini rocket that's so cute. Elon laughed, kneeling down to her level. I think Mars is a great name, but if you want to build a real rocket, you'll have to ask me for help. Deal, she said with a serious nod, before running off to explore more of her new home. May joined Elon in the doorway, watching her daughter. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. I can't believe we're really here. Elon looked at her, his eyes full of sincerity. You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad I could help. But, May, this is just the beginning. You and Amelia deserve so much more than just a house. You deserve a life where you can be free to chase your dreams, without all the burdens weighing you down. She smiled softly, her voice thick with emotion. I'm starting to believe that. The weeks that followed were filled with changes, small and big. They decorated the house together, made memories in the kitchen, and spent quiet evenings watching movies or simply talking. Elon found himself more and more involved in their lives, not just as a benefactor, but as a friend, a companion, and in many ways, a surrogate father figure for Amelia. But it was the quiet moments that stood out the most, the moments where they were just living, where the outside world felt far away, and the only thing that mattered was the warmth of the home they were building together. One evening, after dinner, Elon took a walk outside, his thoughts drifting as he gazed up at the stars. He had always felt an intense connection to the universe, but now, standing in front of a house filled with life and laughter, he realized that there was something equally important right here on Earth, the people he cared about. May joined him on the porch, a mug of tea in her hands. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him, her presence comforting. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft in the cool night air. "I'm glad you're here, Elon. I never thought I'd find someone who could make me feel like I'm not alone. Like we're not alone." Elon turned to her, his eyes warm with understanding. "You don't have to worry about that anymore. You're not alone. Not ever." They stood there in silence, watching the stars above. For a brief moment, the world outside felt like it was on pause, and all that mattered was the life they were building together. Some promises are made quietly, without fanfare or celebration, but they carry more weight than any grand gesture. The new house was more than just a physical space. It was becoming a sanctuary. Each day that passed, May and Amelia grew more comfortable, settling into their routines. The walls, once bare, now had framed family photos, hand-painted artwork, and the little knickknacks that made the place feel truly like home. But more than that, the house had become a place of healing, a place where their past struggles could gradually be replaced by new memories. Elon found himself visiting more frequently, not just as a benefactor, but as someone who genuinely cared. He'd bring over dinner some nights, share stories about his latest ventures, and offer a listening ear whenever May needed to talk. The three of them became a familiar, inseparable trio, one that found comfort in the simplicity of each other's company. One afternoon, Elon and May sat in the living room, sipping coffee and talking about the future. Amelia was outside, riding her new bike around the yard, her laughter echoing through the house. May looked out the window, her expression soft. "I still can't believe we're here," she murmured. "I never thought life could change this much. I never thought we could have something like this. Stability, peace." Elon glanced at her, his voice gentle. "Sometimes, all it takes is someone believing in you. I believed in you, May, and in Amelia. I saw something in you both, strength, resilience. It was worth investing in." May shook her head in disbelief. "I don't know how to thank you enough. I never could have dreamed of a future like this." "You don't need to thank me," Elon said, leaning forward. "I'm not here because I expect gratitude. I'm here because I know you deserve this. I'm here because you matter." The weight of his words settled between them, both comforting and overwhelming. In the past, Elon had built rockets, advanced technologies, and groundbreaking companies, but it was moments like this that reminded him of what truly mattered: human connection, kindness, and the chance to make a real difference in someone's life. "I still don't fully understand why you helped us," May said quietly. "It's not just the house, it's everything you've done. The way you've been there, without asking for anything in return." Elon met her gaze, his eyes filled with honesty. "Maybe I'm just tired of chasing things that don't matter. Maybe, for once, I want to be part of something that lasts, something that makes a real impact." There was a pause as they both let the weight of that conversation settle. It felt like they were on the brink of something new, something that wasn't about wealth or ambition, but about the deep connection that binds people together. A few days later, Elon took May and Amelia to a small, quiet park just outside the city. The afternoon sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden light over everything. Amelia had insisted on bringing her bike, and Elon, with his characteristic grin, had promised to race her. May watched them, smiling to herself as Elon effortlessly kept up with the little girl, even though he clearly wasn't in his prime biking years. There was a sense of peace in the air, a simplicity that had been missing from their lives for so long. The park was a stark contrast to the bustling streets of the city, a place where time seemed to slow down and the noise of the world faded away. Amelia pulled up beside May, breathless from the race. "I won," she declared, her face flushed with excitement. "You did, kiddo," Elon said, catching up with him and pretending to be out of breath. "But just wait until next time." May chuckled at the sight of the two of them, her heart light. "It's good to see her happy again," she said quietly, watching Amelia as she zoomed off again. "She's been through so much, and now she's just being a kid." Elon nodded, his eyes following Amelia's every move. "She deserves to just be a kid. She deserves to feel safe, loved, and free from fear. And you're giving her that," May said, her voice filled with quiet gratitude. Elon glanced over at her, his expression serious. "I'm just giving her what everyone deserves, a shot at a better future. And you deserve that too, May. Not just for Amelia, but for yourself." May turned to him, her gaze softening. She had never expected someone like Elon Musk to be so selfless, so genuine. He had given them not only a home but a chance to rebuild their lives, to start fresh. "Do you ever think about your own future?" she asked, her voice thoughtful. "What's next for you?" Elon thought about it for a moment. "I think about it all the time. But for now, I'm focused on what's right in front of me. And right now, this is what matters." Later that evening, as the sun set and the sky darkened, they sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. It was peaceful, almost surreal. A year ago, May never could have imagined that this would be her life. A year ago, she hadn't known if she would survive the struggle. But here she was, with a future ahead of her, and a man beside her who had helped make it all possible. "Do you think things will ever go back to how they were?" May asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elon looked at her, his expression calm. "No, and that's a good thing. Things are better now. We're moving forward, not backward." May smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in a long time. "I never thought I'd feel this way again. But now I believe we can make it." Elon leaned back in his chair, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "You already have, May. You already have." And as they sat there together, watching the world quiet down around them, it was clear that they had all found something they had been searching for, something bigger than the struggles they had faced, something more lasting than the trials they had endured. It was hope. It was home. And most importantly, it was the promise of tomorrow. Sometimes, the hardest part of change isn't embracing it. It's realizing the change was exactly what you needed all along. The months that followed were nothing short of transformative. What had once felt like a pipe dream, a safe, stable home for May and Amelia, had become their reality. And that reality was far richer than either of them could have ever imagined. Amelia, now 8, had grown more confident and independent. Her schoolwork was improving, her social skills blossomed, and she even began taking an interest in things like reading and drawing. What was most striking was the absence of fear in her eyes, a fear that had haunted her for so long. Instead, there was a quiet joy in her that radiated from her every action. Elon, too, found his life subtly altered. The hours spent in meetings, the long flights, the pressure of his companies, all of it seemed to shrink in comparison to the moments he spent with May and Amelia. It wasn't just that he had done something kind. It was that he had rediscovered something vital in himself, something he hadn't realized was missing until he saw the difference it made in the lives of others. One chilly morning, Elon was at the house, drinking coffee with May at the kitchen table. Amelia was getting ready for school, a sight that always warmed May's heart. She was wearing a bright yellow dress, her favorite, and had her hair in 2 puffy ponytails. It felt like a small moment of victory, one that they didn't take for granted. May looked at Elon with a thoughtful expression. "I've been meaning to ask you something," she began, her voice soft. "Sure, anything," Elon replied, looking up from his mug. "Have you ever thought about doing more of this? Helping more people, in ways that go beyond just giving them a house?" she asked, her curiosity piqued. Elon paused, considering the question. He hadn't really thought about it in those terms before. He had been so focused on his work, on his business, on space exploration and technology. But now, when he thought about it, there was something deeply rewarding in what he had done for May and Amelia. Helping them had given him a sense of purpose beyond his typical work, a sense of fulfillment that felt more real than anything he had accomplished in the boardroom. "I've thought about it," he said slowly, placing his cup down on the table. "Helping people, but I think I've been waiting for something. Some sign that this is what I'm supposed to do. Something that tells me it's worth it." May nodded, understanding. Maybe that sign has already shown up. Maybe it's about using your resources for something that truly matters. Not just for people you can help, but for the world you want to build. Elon gazed out the window for a moment, his mind turning. There had been so many moments recently, small moments, quiet ones, that had led him to think differently about what success really meant. It wasn't just about building rockets or electric cars anymore. It was about how he could make an impact on the lives of everyday people, how he could use his position, his wealth, his influence, to leave a legacy that mattered. "I've always believed in pushing the boundaries of what's possible," he said, his voice thoughtful. "But I think now it's about pushing the boundaries of what's good for humanity, what's good for people, especially those who don't have the resources to help themselves." May smiled, her heart swelling with pride for the man who had become more than just a billionaire to her. He had become someone who understood that true wealth wasn't about money. It was about how you used your influence to make the world better. "You know," she said after a pause, "I think that's what makes the difference. It's the realization that we all have the power to change things. It's not about grand gestures. It's about the small things that add up over time." "I think you're right," Elon replied, a grin tugging at his lips. "And I think I'm ready to start making those small things count for something bigger." That afternoon, Elon made an unexpected announcement during a company meeting. It wasn't about the latest technological breakthrough or a new venture he was investing in. Instead, it was about a new initiative he was launching, one that was deeply personal to him. After a lot of thought, he began, addressing his team. "I've decided to focus on a project that's closer to home. We're going to launch a nonprofit foundation aimed at helping children and families who have fallen through the cracks, those who struggle to find stable housing, education, or basic resources. We have the ability to make a difference, and it's time to put that ability to work in a way that matters." There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by a ripple of applause. Some of his employees had been working with Elon for years, and they knew how much he cared about his various projects. But this felt different. It was a reflection of everything he had learned in the past few months, and it was a mission that everyone in the room could get behind. For Elon, it was the beginning of something new, a new direction for his life, one that he hadn't seen coming but now felt more certain of than anything else he had done. And as he watched the reaction from his team, he knew that this wasn't just about making money or getting accolades. This was about creating a better future for the next generation. A future that was, at its core, built on kindness, understanding, and a deep belief in the power of change. Later that evening, Elon stood on the porch of the house, watching the sunset with May and Amelia. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the cool air carried with it the promise of a new season. Amelia had just finished her homework and was outside with a few neighborhood friends, laughing as they ran around the yard. Elon turned to May, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You know," he said, "I think I'm going to be okay with this. With all of it. With the changes. With everything." May glanced at him, her eyes warm. "I think we all are." And in that moment, they all knew something important, that life wasn't just about surviving the hard times. It was about the choices you made in the good ones. And together, they were making choices that would shape their future, their world, in ways no one could have ever predicted. With that, they all turned toward the horizon, knowing that tomorrow was not just another day. It was the beginning of something extraordinary.